It's time for Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott, Richard Campbell are here. The EU is at it again. Now they're investigating Teams. We'll talk about the latest Canary version of Windows and some nice new features. And there's a lot of Xbox news as well, plus a delicious brown liquor, all that and more coming up next with Windows Weekly. Stay here.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Windows Weekly with Richard Campbell and Paul Thurrott. Episode 840, recorded Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. Buried in Corn. This episode of Windows Weekly is brought to you by ACI Learning. Keep your team's IT skills current. Visit go.acilearning.com/twit. Twit listeners will receive at least 20% off or as much as 65% off an IT Pro Enterprise Solution Plan. Discount based on size of team. And when you fill out their form, you'll get a proper quote tailored to your needs. Hello, Microsoftians. You dozers and winners. It's time for Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott is here from Thurrott.com, back in the homeland, the heart of America, Macungie, PA. Hello, Paul.
I don't even know where I live anymore. That's just weird.
Can you get good tacos in Macungie? That's the thing I care most about.
No. You cannot. You can get good hot dogs in Macungie.
Oh, I know. Mad dogs, baby. Mad dogs.
And excellent train spotting, too.
Oh, yes. All the time. Day and night. That's Mr. Richard Campbell. He is the host of RunAsRadio.net Rocks. He is joining us from the great Pacific Northwest in Coquitlam, British Columbia. And together, they will talk about the latest Microsoft news, of which there is some. It's nice. Microsoft does not, August is often kind of the
doldrums.
Yeah, it's not going to be this year.
For news.
Activision Blizzard's happening. Yeah. There's all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah. It's funny. I was on campus on Monday, and I was talking to a few different teams who said, you know how we normally go kind of quiet in August? Not this year. There's a bunch of teams going flat out for stuff they want to do.
Is that the AI thing going on?
It's certainly part of it, but it's the number of different teams that are impacted and how they're impacted is interesting. So the campus is not recovered from the pandemic; like it's still pretty quiet. There are pockets of activity here and there. There's certain popular buildings that are fun to hang out in, but there's lots of people working. Like the responsiveness on email, which normally is difficult this time of year. Yeah, now everybody's still working.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's a strange year. No two ways about it.
Yeah. And also, in national news. So normally reporters would be at the beach trying to find
Martha's Vineyard
lifestyle stories. But no, not this August. Let's start with Windows.
It's for the best.
It is for the best because you guys and idle hands are the devil's workshop.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Everyone's so excited about the summer because the kids are off and everything. But the reality is if you want to go somewhere, you want to go some other time of year, Stay home. It's crazy out there.
Yep. Can we talk about, I don't know, what do you want to talk about? What's on your mind? You guys had a great conversation, which we will, by the way, produce and put on our Twit Plus feed for the club members before the show. About Sun and about GitHub and about all sorts of interesting stuff. That was great.
Said this in the Discord chat, and just for the benefit of others. I mean, this is just Richard and I. This is like
nothing unusual. Yeah.
Well, you were talking. I thought it was interesting. You were talking about how GitHub these days is a path to employment at Microsoft. But I think it's true in general. The advice that you give every programmer is make sure you do a lot of commits and get stars on your GitHub page because companies are looking there. That's where they look because that's real work.
Go ahead, Fred. No, go ahead.
It's not the only mechanism by far, but it's certainly a simple one that says if there's no better way to show you're a competent programmer to write code, right, and have it out there where we don't think about it this way, but the original name of GitHub, like its catchphrase was social coding, right? That it is a kind of social media for developers and where we communicate about software and we support each other in software. And the fact that, Laura, there's a plus and minus to this has certainly been a theme on .NET Rocks for a long time now of what happens when the tech giants show up to this space.
Right.
And you go from independent folks who are working on their side projects in GitHub to Microsoft FTEs working 40 hours a week, all through GitHub. Like all of C# is now developed through GitHub. All of .NET. It's got pluses and minuses. Like it has consequences.
But even Google... So Google has this new web integrity initiative, which is really code for nastiness.
I'm glad I wasn't drinking when you said that. But
yeah. But,
yes.
But where did they post the manifesto? Where did the theses get hammered onto the door? It was on GitHub. It has become the public square for coders, really.
I can't wait for Elon Musk to buy it and call it Y or something.
Heaven forfend. Did you see he just did a deal with Las Vegas for 48 more miles of holes? If you get a chance, have you guys done this? Taken the Boring Company's? It goes from, it's only one hotel to the convention center. And a 45-mile bumpy ride in a Tesla, 3 to a car. It's the most absurd. He reinvented subways, but did it worse.
Sure.
And now Vegas is giving him.
Tech's answer to P.T. Barnum, it continues to amuse, but we didn't want to talk about this, but I would say the issue with Twitter, as I will continue to call it, screw you, Elon, is that aside from all the obvious stuff, billions of dollars of values down the tube, blah, 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 whatever, is there's an essential service element to Twitter that people don't talk about enough, where governments of all sizes relied on it to communicate with citizens in times of crisis or whatever.
So they should use GitHub. That's what I'm saying. That's how we got into
that
this.
idea. So a lot of them are starting to. I don't think Mastodon has gotten the mainstream kind of volume needed for
incumbent.
that.
There's no new replacement, unfortunately.
But this is a big loss, and it's.
I agree.
It's a problem. So
I don't know. But like I said, maybe GitHub could be the new town.
It's actually not. It's very interesting.
Well, LinkedIn. You know what? Another
LinkedIn.
Microsoft property. LinkedIn is definitely a winner from this.
Well, so the thing about Twitter though was it was sort of like changing channels on a TV. Like people could just get to it and see it. News articles could link to it, and I think these other. I guess you could do this on GitHub. I don't know about LinkedIn, but they need there has to be like an open public feed. Yeah. That doesn't require you to sign in and.
Right. Well, Elon ironically turned that off briefly. I think it's back on, but you had to be logged in to see.
Oh, he's just genius.
What a genius.
No, genius.
Yeah, glances, that's the meta choices, is very much like the old Twitter. It's kind of jolly and fun. Lots of brands, lots of news organizations signed up in the early flurry, and now they say about half those people have just stopped using it.
Well, of course. I mean, it's what's the opposite of inertia? That's what it has.
Entropy.
Whatever that. Entropy. Yeah. I don't know. It's worse than that. It's like a kind of go backwards. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. I think Facebook Meta, whatever, has the volume, to make it successful. But
I think what Threads plugged into was. It's 2023. Nobody got time to build another social graph.
Right.
Like you're done.
Right.
And so migrating an existing social graph is smart.
Yeah,
like we'll at least look at that. Even if
they hosed up
Instagram.
And of course they launched with 100 million.
Instagram makes me crazy. I spend 90% of my time on Instagram telling it why I don't want to see this ad.
But you post
or this suggestion
prolifically, Paul.
Yeah, I know because I like the idea of Instagram. I've always used it for photography. It wasn't.
Yeah, but
it's vaguely, it's funny. People know me from the tech world, and so people will see some picture and they'll say, "Oh, what's that computer?" or "What phone are you using?" And it's like that's not really the point,
right?
But it's okay. I mean, it's just I don't know. It serves a purpose. But I don't know.
Yeah, all I get, maybe it's me, maybe like Instagram knows me, but all I get on Instagram is ads like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Old men doing
So,
chair exercises. It doesn't.
There was a wonderful moment in time when Instagram actually would show me ads that I cared about.
Yeah, not anymore.
It lasted about 6 months.
Yeah.
And it was fun, and now it's right.
Then you
I see
switched to Brave and broke everything.
Yeah, exactly. All I see on Instagram now are basketball shorts, like short videos.
Well,
And
this is actually an interesting question. We were talking about this yesterday on Security Now. It's giving you ads that, based on your demographic, it thinks you'd be interested in.
Yeah.
Same with me. I get a lot of erectile dysfunction ads.
Sure.
And I think that's. Steve was asking.
It's stupid.
Do advertisers think that targeted advertising works? And all the evidence is it's not. Really.
All the evidence is it does not.
It does not.
I just got away. This little mint has been sex life altering.
Oh yeah, I get that one too.
There you go. So we're in the same demographic.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Over 50, give them ED stuff and chair exercises.
I mean, I don't even know what to say to this. I don't know. This is.
They were for a while. It was once every 10 images. Now it's, I think, every third image.
Oh no, it's awful.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. You have to force it to see your feed, and I don't like that.
Yeah, that whole mechanism, and you can also lay this on TikTok as well, which is TikTok doesn't care what your feed is. It's going to show you stuff and watch what you do. And bit by bit, all the other social media have migrated.
Which is, you have to appreciate the honesty in that.
That works,
yes, you know what it is.
And it wasn't
you're
overwhelmed
not
with
qualified
ads.
for an opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a product. Be quiet.
Shut up and consume.
Shut up and be a product.
Shut up and consume. Yeah, I get this one too. This is some, by the way, somewhere it says not a doctor.
Yeah. The one you were showing earlier, I see all the time. It's the
fat men. T-shirts for fat men.
Shirts for fat men. Yeah.
How do they know?
Is there some science involved where, like, from different angles I actually look thinner?
Well, I think they don't understand how creepy this feels.
Yeah.
It's a real turnoff. Anyway, clearly we have reached the third stage of identification, and in almost all of these networks. And so,
it's the phase where you're laying in the coffin and you're not quite dead, but you see them lowering the cover and you're like, wait, I'm still here, and it's too late.
You're stuck between, do I fight back keeping the lid open, or it's like, I was tired anyway.
My analogy is, when you wring out a washcloth, you get some of the water out, but if you really want to get the money out of people, you got to fold it over twice and just, really squeeze, and then you're going to get every penny out of your consumers. And I feel like I'm the washcloth getting.
Yeah. Are you sufficiently wrung out yet?
Yes, I'm highly wrung out. Anyway, let's talk about a happier subject. Let's talk about Microsoft.
The Canary build?
The Canary build. There you go. Whoa.
Hey, speaking of things that have too much advertising in them, Windows.
It's not nearly as bad. And so I think maybe that's one of the side effects of all of this. Philip K. Dick had a great short story about ads on every surface, and it's really become that way.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the side effects of that is even something like Windows, which should be ad free, a little bit of ads. See, and they can say, well, it's not as bad. It's not as bad as Instagram.
Yeah. This is what I fear moving away from the enterprise versions of Windows, is that the enterprise stuff really doesn't have much of this at all. But as I'm hanging up this infrastructure, I'm afraid I'm going to get exposed to all of it. Well, I haven't been.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this wasn't on the topic list, but so a long time request of people is, could I just pay for enterprise and not get this crap?
Right.
Yeah.
And, or pay something, pay as part of Microsoft 365, pay as a separate subscription, invent a name that doesn't make it look like you're decrapifying it when in fact you are. Somebody asked me actually Friday about what happened to the Signature PC program and how does that relate to Surface and all that kind of stuff. And the irony of Signature PC, which was a program Microsoft had back in the Windows 7 days, I guess, was that they wanted to show PC makers not to put crapware on their computers. So they would literally take boxes of computers, open them up, put a clean image on them that had no crapware, sell them to customers, and then say, see, like this works. And now Microsoft doesn't do that anymore. And they put their own crapware in Windows. So it's kind of come full circle. And it's sad. It's crazy, like how much the world has changed. But that's the market.
Maybe we need a bot that every time you show an ad, it automatically generates a letter to that company saying, "I will never buy your products because you advertised here." Just make it easy to constantly just remind them you're not wasting my time and money.
Yeah, I there's so much like, oh God, we could just do an entire show on this certification thing. I bet 2 years reaching out to Google every day in the morning about why their newsfeed, which is supposed to be tech, because that's what I'm looking at, is some story about menopause or women's relation or some nonsense, whatever it is. And like, this is not a tech story. Anyone would know this. How do we trust your AI if you're not? So anyway, nothing. It's not gotten better.
Look what
so
Microsoft. Look what Microsoft recommended for me today. This is talk about link bait. This was in my little notification on the lower left.
Damn.
Does Yellowstone return tonight? By the way, if you click this, because I had to. Oh, it's back. It says no, it's not.
No, it's not.
That's the
terrible.
That's the article.
Yeah.
No, actually, no, it's not. Okay. Thank you, Microsoft, for recommending that. Very useful. Oh, and by the way, it opened an Edge. Yeah.
As someone who has to write headlines, I react very viscerally to bad headlines, and I make fun of them on Twitter every day. I can't stand.
It's such blatant link bait. It's like,
it's just, I can't stand it. And the worst example these days is the weather stuff. 150 million people in the path of whatever.
Yeah, I love that one. I love that one. It's hot. It's 100 million people under heat warnings.
We've all just been treated to a month of stories about how freaking hot it is in Phoenix. And let me tell you something about Phoenix. It's actually always this hot. It's always this hot.
Yes.
When we lived there in 1993, 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago, 30 years ago. That first summer, we had 70 something days in a row over 100 degrees. Yeah. My sister flew out. The plane could not land because it was 126 degrees outside and the tarmac was only rated to 124 or whatever. It was literally a semi-soft liquid. Had to wait for that to happen.
Ew.
She landed, told me she brought a sweater because she heard it was cold in the desert at night. And I said, yes, it may get down to 111 this evening. I don't think you're going to need the sweater, honey. But we have friends who still live there.
In college, I fell for a woman who lived in Phoenix. And I briefly moved to Phoenix for 1 week because after the week of 113-degree days, I said, yeah, I love
no
you,
amount
dear.
Of love.
You're great, but not here.
Twice I lived in Phoenix for about 6 years. Twice walked out to the mailbox to get my mail in sandals and burned my feet through the sandals because the ground was so hot.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
I also, it's such a weird play. I just remember this the other day. We walked out of a supermarket, literally the first week we were there, and there were machines outside. So it was a Coke machine, Pepsi machine, and the water machine. And the water machine was only 25 cents. And I was like, oh my God, that's obviously what I want. So I put the 25 cents in the machine, and a gallon of water gushed out all over the ground because you're supposed to walk up to it with
put a bottle under it. You dope.
I wasn't getting a glass of water. I was getting a gallon of water.
For a quarter, though, it was a deal. Did you put your head
is this the surface of Mars? What is this? Anyway, we have friends who still live there, and we were talking with them recently, and they said, you know what? Yeah, it's okay. So it's 110 every day or whatever.
It's built for that. I mean, they know
it's 108 every day forever. Yeah. It's been like that for 35 years. Yeah. It's the difference between 108 and 110 is two settings on an air dryer and a hair dryer. Rather. Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't matter. It's hot. We get
Too hot.
I loved all the stories about tourists who went to Death Valley to experience the hottest temperature and then died.
I was going to say, the name is literal. It's not a
valley. Yes.
Oh, so it's not just a catchy name. It's
it's a dry heat. Yeah.
We're going to California. Should we walk through Death Valley or Fun Valley? Let's try the Death one. That sounds,
Okay, I'm going to try one more time. Canary.
Yeah, sorry. So
what? Wait, what?
Canary.
All right. So last week, Microsoft released a new build to the Canary channel of the Windows Insider program that brought in features from the dev channel. So no big deal. This is all the stuff we know is coming. The modernized File Explorer home experience, passkey support, never combine mode in the taskbar, whatever. So the theory with the Canary channel is that this will be Windows 12. So it kind of makes sense that any features that go to Windows 11 will eventually show up in Windows 12 too, right? It's the next version of Windows 11. So nothing new there. More interesting is right before the show started, Microsoft dropped new builds for the beta channel and the dev channel. Now, the thing we kind of have to get into our brain right now, because for most of the time this is not the case. But right now, the beta channel actually equates to a very specific version of Windows, the next version, which is Windows 11 23H2, which is also Moment 4, right? This enablement package that's going to turn 22H2 into the next version of Windows. Cool. But that means that as they add features to this channel, we're not 100%, but we're pretty sure these are going to be features of 23H2. So some of the features they added in this version, for example, are Windows Copilot, right? Which was, I think, previously tested in the dev channel only, if I'm not mistaken. Dev Drive, which they announced at Build this past year. Some interesting Narrator Excel integration. Some new voice access text authoring features, which I sort of assumed were always the point, which is you're using your voice not just to input text, but to prompt for corrections and so forth, right? Which is kind of cool. There's a passwordless experience for Windows Hello for Business. There's a new screencast experience. People probably don't even know Windows has this, but if you have a Wi-Fi equipped computer, you can do something that's like Chromecast today that actually uses Miracast.
It's a Miracast, yeah.
Yeah. They're improving that experience. The present stuff I talked about in the past, where right now third-party PC makers are the ones that have to add this functionality to their computers, but the idea is that Windows will now sense when you are approaching and leaving a computer, and will do things with the screen, and also enable Windows Hello instantly, right, if you're using the camera experience, which is really cool. So if you're interested in 23H2, it might be worth looking at the post that came out today about this new beta channel build, because this is it. Like this is going to be the next version of Windows.
Yeah. Yeah, I just hope there's not too many ads.
Oh boy. So in my in my notes, I mentioned lots more. And if you scroll down to the end of this post, I don't know if this is in the post that Laurent put on my site, but there is. Let me scroll all the way down. It's a big post. There is some interesting stuff coming to the start menu. I think it was Moment 3 that added that little bit of advertising for OneDrive that's off of the profile menu in the start menu that nobody really thinks about. Actually, I'm seeing it right now. So when I bring up the start menu, there's a little orange kind of highlight on my profile picture. And when I click that, I wasn't sure exactly what it was going to say, but I knew it was going to be about OneDrive. It says back up your files. Folders like documents and pictures will be saved to the cloud to help keep them safe. And then I can start the backup there. I recommend that nobody ever does this. Not that nobody ever uses this feature necessarily, but that you don't make this decision here. I don't understand. This is like a basic kind of usage decision. I just had this conversation with Stephanie before we flew home from Mexico. She was saying, I got to download some stuff to a computer so I can use it offline. And I said, if you're using your computer correctly, everything you need will be offline because you're syncing it with OneDrive perhaps. And that's one of those ways you can work. So I guess I'll be having a class on that soon here at the home if anyone wants to join in. But anyway, Microsoft wants to have people, back up their important folders. So documents, pictures, videos. No. Documents. Oh, desktop. Desktop documents and pictures. At the least, some people are also seeing the additional folders, music and videos. That's one of those weird things.
And you would presume all those things could just be synced to OneDrive. Like, why make people think about this?
Yeah, you know what? That's absolutely happening. And I say that not knowing it's happening, but based on the trajectory that we've seen so far, it's kind of like Microsoft accounts. Like, why even give people the option not to use a Microsoft account? And they're like, yeah, they'll get there, and now they're getting there. Yeah. And what you just said, I think, falls into the same category.
As long as they make signing up a Microsoft account not so painful. We've had them for so long now. Try making a new one.
I make a new one for the book every year, and it's always amusing to me.
There were worse periods. It's gotten better, but it's still not great.
Oh, and also I can't. Can I? No, I can't do this from here. But speaking of advertising in Windows, sign up for a new Microsoft account, never use it, and then look at it in 6 months. you will have 1,100 messages in your email inbox, all from Microsoft,
Right.
promoting Xbox and OneDrive and Microsoft 365 and everything else they offer to consumers. Like it's
I flag those all as spam, but it never seems to work.
Yeah. Well, right. So that's, I don't know how we're getting off on weird tangents today, but anyway, to your point, I'm sorry. So I was saying in the start menu, there's already this sort of start of like advertising. They're actually doing well. So that the thing I just meant, like advertising OneDrive or whatever, not
right.
There's also Crapware, which is its own form of advertising, right? When you see icons for, WhatsApp and Spotify and whatever else, like those are all sponsored, right? So they get nice prominent placement in the start menu. If you click on it, it's not actually installed. It will install at that point and you get to use it. And, I don't know what the kickback there is, but 1 cent per click or something. Who knows? But there's going to be some interesting kind of hover and right click experience for files in the start menu, which I think is kind of cool. It's Microsoft, so they're not doing it universally, but like, for example, with Word documents that you see in the recommended section, when you mouse over, there will be thumbnails.
Wow.
Kind of interesting, kind of Apple-like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also a right click, or there will be coming a right click option. If you right click a file, you'll be able to share it from there. And that uses the system wide share functionality that I believe I am the only user of in the entire planet Earth. But I use it a lot because I share files with myself when I'm taking screenshots.
I cannot get used to the Windows 11 context menus. The whole icons for your most common tasks, which are so small you can't find them, and
so indiscernible, you don't know what they are.
Yeah, and you stare at the list, wondering where the thing you want to do is.
Yeah. When Microsoft was working on the Metro design language for Windows, well, it started earlier than that, but they started promoting it with Windows Phone Series 7 series. They likened it to, the reason they called it Metro is because this is the type of iconic, I can never say this word, iconography that you see in the world in transit stations, like trains, airports, whatever. And the idea is people in Europe, especially, this is all kind of Europe centric, but it's not just Europe, but this is Asia, everywhere in the world. But you show up in one of these stations and you could be from any country speaking any language. We don't all have that common language experience, but anyone could look at the icons and know exactly where to go. They don't have to be able to read the words. It's a good idea, but it only works when we understand what those things are. And to your point, when you right click on on an item, actually, you don't just right click on the desktop and you get those weird icons at the top. Those are the most commonly needed choices and they're not called out with words.
Right.
And what
make the most commonly needed choices the hardest to discern.
And it's also, and I don't want to get into the weirdness of navigation like that. A pop-up menu is a vertical menu of choices, but this thing is a horizontal toolbar of sorts of choices, and it forces you to kind of do this thing, which is not, I think, how most people think when they're right-clicking on something, but whatever. Microsoft. So anyway, yes, there's going to be a lot more pop-ups. They're going to be doing pop-ups for apps, which Microsoft already does. Everyone probably, I assume, by this point has seen the pop-up over the search bar that says, "Hey, did you know we got Bing stuff going on? Be sure to click here." You're going to see that for the Microsoft 365 app, which is what used to be the Office app. And
it occurs to me that the right thing for them to do is to take, in theory, it's like all of the regular stuff has an icon, and then the stuff is still the other stuff is still in the list, and you're used to looking for the list. They should hide the list behind an icon too. So you right clicking is just a string of icons, and the last icon is the one for the other. Right now, they've made other easier to find than the things.
That's right. Right. In other words, they know what people click on the most, and instead of putting those up front and center and forcing power users who need weirder things to click once to get to a new menu, they put that stuff up front. I guess in some bid to get people to see and use it. I don't know.
Yeah. No,
it's too bad.
It's bad.
Yeah, it is bad. So anyway, there's that. So we got, like I said, new dev and beta channel builds today. Beta channel maps to 23H2. There you go. Excellent. So that's such as it is.
No, I mean, I really do feel like there's progress being made in all these different angles. Like it feels more like there's a Win 12 out there than ever been before. For a long time, this was just speculation from my crazy friend from Pennsylvania, right? But now it's starting to look like there might actually be a thing there.
So Okay. Yes, I agree. And about your crazy friend, especially. But yeah, and realistically speaking, it's August. So this thing that is 23H2 will be finalized this month.
It has to be,
we
yeah.
are probably not far away from what essentially is the final feature set, but also what is essentially the final code with bug fixes and whatever to come. So
Yeah. And then security patches after that. To your point, 23H2 should be the last rev of 11, essentially.
I think so.
Except for issues.
From a hardware software compatibility standpoint, right? They're not changing the underlying code. So, and on for all the complaints I have about Microsoft and Windows, and especially these days, like that's good. That's good. Like this is where you want that.
They're getting as annoying as this year has been around understanding what they're doing. I'm almost starting to feel a groove. Like maybe they've gotten there.
So we talked about that white paper, remember 2-3 weeks ago, whenever that was, that they put out about updating. And it wasn't a statement of strategy and intent. It was literally an explanation for what we've been doing as Microsoft for the past 8 years, and making up as we went along. Mm-hmm. So now that Windows 10
are they supposed to write it out 100 times? Is that what that actually was?
I think it was a version 1.0. You saw that you called that out. It was like the version 1.0.
Really?
You're going to be kidding me. But okay. I mean, that's fine. And I feel, and we've talked endlessly this calendar year, about how much the way that Windows is updated has changed. I mean, it almost every month there's like a difference,
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to have settled down finally. I mean, God knows they'll change it again, but whatever. So as we kind of enter into this 23H2 thing, yeah, I like you said it. I think you said like they've reached a groove of some kind. I agree. I feel like they, after a lot of experimentation and not really knowing where they were going to land.
Well, I still think there's a VP who finally called the ball. It's like, you three teams, get in the room here.
Sure.
Now write down what you did, tell the world, go forth and sin no more. And the sin has ended.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
not going to say they repented.
No. And we're never going to get an apology or an explanation. But
no, I think you got it. V1.
Yeah, V1 is, It's like, you imagine they were like rock, paper, scissoring who was going to have to write it. And it was like, Bob was like, oh, come on.
Again, I got to write it again.
No, this is very much a Breakfast Club moment. Yeah. You're the smartest one. You do.
Yeah, you seem to understand this. You talk about this like it makes sense. I think you should write it.
Yeah.
So anyway, good for them. So look forward to 23H2 kind of finalizing in some way this month. That will definitely happen. Well, I should never be so definitive. That will almost certainly happen. Let's put it.
Yeah, unless something else happens, in which case you'll complain bitterly about it.
Exactly.
I thought, well, there was a plan here, boys.
And then we got two interesting
CPU quarterly stories.
Well, I was going to say quarterly revenue stories, but yes, from CPU makers, right? And both of them are interestingly similar. Intel was actually profitable again after not being profitable for 2 quarters in a row. In fact, I think it was the quarter before they had their worst downfall in corporate history, if I remember correctly.
Is that an Intel recession? Is that what we should call it?
An Intel recession. An Intel recession is kind of like the opposite of a real recession, I think. But but anyway, so Intel stronger than expected earnings. Still major drops, like client computing business was down 12% year over year, but also better than expected. And they started talking about the future, and not just in vague ways, like, Intel sees over 300 PC designs coming on the 13th gen Core chipset this year, blah, 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 whatever. AI is coming. We know that they're building, they don't call it this, but they're building an NPU into their chipsets. Yes, we've known that for a long time. But they indicated as part of their earnings report that the PC market is going to begin rebounding in the second half of this calendar year. And, again, no actual sign of it, but when Intel says that, I mean, they would know. They see the orders coming in. It seems like PC makers and we're also buying again. So that's kind of interesting. On the flip side, we have AMD, same thing, smaller company, but same issues. Their profit actually fell 94%. I don't worry too much about the profit stuff, but their revenues fell 18% year over year. And it's sort of like Microsoft, AMD has some number of business units. I think it's 5. their client business, which is PCs, is the smallest now. It used to be, I think, 50% of the company, if I'm not mistaken. And the revenues there declined 54% year over year to under $1 billion.
Wow.
I'd have to go look and see the last time that was under $1 billion. But, weaker PC market, inventory correction on the PCs, supply chain, blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
Where Intel said that they had 300 PC designs coming this calendar year. AMD said they have over 100, and they specified commercial PCs, which I take to mean business PCs. But
okay,
it might just mean
consumer. All right,
that's what it seems like it's probably 100 total.
I wonder how much of the CHIPS Act impacts this too, because I think Wall Street was reacting strongly to them building new fabs and not building them in the Southeast Asia.
Yes, actually, we should get back to that one second because I skipped something about Intel, unfortunately. Anyway, Intel or AMD also said they expect growth in the second half of the year. In fact, they specified double-digit growth to both their data center and client segments, which is the PC market. So that's good. Yeah, so I skipped over this other thing. I didn't write about this myself, but I saw someone pointed me to a story that was in Tom's Hardware today that Intel has filed a permit application outlining its plans for expanding its Gordon Moore Park campus in Oregon to the tune of how much? Where's the figure? Is there a figure? I thought there was a figure. Maybe there isn't. I thought it was some X billion.
$1 million.
Yeah, I'm not really okay. Actually, I guess there isn't a figure. I thought there was a billion something figure.
It's probably in the billions, of course.
It's probably
in the billions. Yeah.
You know, it's also telling. You didn't mention this, but ARM now is looking at doing a IPO. So clearly, there's a feeling that silicon is back, baby.
So Leo would know this, and possibly Richard too. Sorry, but they were going to IPO before, remember?
And they were trying to find a buyer, SoftBank.
But after that, one of the things they thought about doing was just IPO,
right?
And actually, the market was so bad they went back on that. So the fact that they're talking about that again, you're right, suggests this stuff is coming back.
Availability of investment, essentially. The crazy part is this, and I would argue that the raise in interest rates has now make it more feasible for IPOs to be successful. Because once upon a time, one of the reasons that you did an initial IPO in the first place was to raise money, to do something big. But when you were borrowing money at virtually nothing, you could borrow billions. Like there's nothing you couldn't borrow.
Even companies like Apple and Microsoft that had plenty of cash were borrowing because it was so cheap. Right?
Even if they would just turn around and buy stock back with it. Right? Like really, that's because money was crazy cheap.
Yeah. ARM,
so now the money's not quite so cheap. A bunch of these mechanisms are going to start working again.
According to Bloomberg, ARM is looking at a $60 to $70 billion valuation in September on NASDAQ for an IPO.
Part of that valuation, no doubt, is tied to Qualcomm paying them extra royalties because they want a PC business so bad that they tried to end run around ARM, and ARM did not like that.
Well, Apple's still an ARM licensee. I mean, the M1 is an ARM design.
No, I was joking. That's a tiny portion of
Well, no, it's all part of it, right? But mostly, I mean, what we're seeing is that Sun wants to desperately get out of this business. So maybe it isn't a bellwether. Maybe he knows something we don't know.
Well, ARM is interesting. I'm trying to think if there's anything quite like them, analogous in the PC world or whatever.
NVIDIA,
I don't think there is.
NVIDIA as a design.
Yeah. But in other words, we don't have so back at like 20 years ago-ish, we used to have this notion of like ODMs, these companies that would create reference designs for laptops and computers. And then companies like Dell and HP and whoever else would buy them and just kind of use them. And every once in a while, you would actually see an example of a computer that was exactly the same form factor, the same exact design. So like Compaq and HP at one point had a tiny 12-inch laptop that they were literally identical.
Yep.
And that's, kind of like a Mercury and a Ford kind of a situation.
It still kind of happens. There's a company in China called Clevo that if you look at it, you can, when you go to Clevo, they have a configurator and you can nice. But it's all white labeled. So nobody buys Clevo laptops. They make them and then you configure them to be kind of more unique. And
then you're like, look, I got an HP.
Yeah, exactly.
From China.
Yeah, Quantum makes the laptops for Apple, or used to anyway.
Well, the ODM market, such as it was 20 years ago-ish, it was probably about exactly 20 years ago. Of course, those companies all became PC makers. Like Asus is an example of one of those companies. They just started making computers. And I kind of wonder with ARM playing a sort of ODM role in that space because they make reference designs of chips and companies build off of those things, right? There are different generations. One of the things that Qualcomm did get caught up in, I think, aside from not trying to pay for the license, is that ARM has started making PC reference designs. And I'm sure part of the deal there is ARM wants Qualcomm to build their PC stuff off of that. But Qualcomm bought a company called Nuvia, and I don't think they want to do
Maybe
that,
we could get a NUC out of ARM. That would be nice.
And an ARM.
I'd buy an ARM NUC.
I would.
A silent
I'm
NUC.
well. Isn't that kind of what Microsoft's development?
The Vesta. Yeah,
that's
basically
kind of
that's what it was.
Yeah,
a
little bigger than a NUC, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Small form factor, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Fun.
Anyway, did I take us down a
I
rat
guess-
hole? I'm sorry. I apologize.
No,
it's
we're
good
listen.
one.
The show's been nothing but rat holes. That was a minor rat hole at best.
Yeah.
I honestly was kind of on track. I guess the point of the Intel AMD stuff is that the two biggest PC makers in the world are not doing great right now, but both of them said the second half of this year is
Chip
going to be
makers,
great.
yeah.
So, yeah.
But we've seen this ripple through, right? All of the PC makers announced their bad news.
Yeah.
All of the, now you've got the tech giants announcing their bad news while still making billions.
Mhm.
And now you've got the hardware makers, the CPU makers doing it as well.
Yeah.
I think what you're finally seeing is the reports that show the post-pandemic effect.
Right.
The overbuying, underbuying, supply chain stuff has all passed through now, been reported out, and everybody's expecting a closer to functional global economy in the second half of this year.
Yeah, and the trick going forward, and this is true of all things, but I look at this from so many perspectives, PC sales every year or whatever, is what this looks like compared to pre-pandemic levels. In other words, if we take out a 2.5 year chunk and just say, pretend this doesn't happen, what does the trajectory look like? Because in some cases, I think you're going to see things return to kind of a normal trajectory. But it's going to be interesting, the markets that don't. Like, what do we leave behind because of this shift? I don't know. I don't know.
And the big one for me, and you see this rippling everywhere, is who's adapting to the fact that interest rates are up. Like, who's over leveraged in their lending, who's able to restructure their financing. Like, that's what's killing companies right now, in even banks. Like the Silicon Valley Bank really comes down to you refuse to refinance based on new interest rates, and you waited a year until you couldn't.
Right. That and other mismanagements can
coming
lead
to you in the second half.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't put this in the notes, but I saw a report in Computer World that I kind of pulled aside in Pocket to read later.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably would have written about this on the flight home from Mexico, but a CMA thing happened that we'll talk about later in the show, and I spent most of the flight writing about that. But the headline was Windows is a declining ecosystem. And I thought to myself, okay, fair enough. I mean, it is, in some ways, but I'm going to read this thing. I'm going to give it its time, and
It's like saying it was all Leo is a dying organism. It's a
exactly
right?
Aren't we all?
Yeah, but
we're all on the wrong side of the bell curve. But
that's so trivial as to be a useless observation.
Yeah. But I wanted to see. I'm like, okay, what does this mean? Like, and so the more you look into the stories, first of all, it's based on a conversation with a single guy. He used to run a company called Jamf. Jamf is an MDM, a mobile device management company that services only Apple devices.
Of course he doesn't.
So what he's saying is like, we had 4,000 customers and 3 million devices like 10 years ago or whatever. And now we have 72,000 customers and more than 30 million devices. Apple is clearly going to win the enterprise.
Oh, please.
And I was like,
wow.
Oh,
I don't know.
That's not a great data point. Wow.
So I looked it up. And the comparable product on the Microsoft side is something called Intune. Yes. Unlike Jamf, Intune is not biased against which products it can manage. It manages everything. So Windows PCs, Macs, Linux, Android, iOS, iPad, whatever, it doesn't matter. It manages everything. Microsoft does not supply usage numbers for Intune, but they do supply information about a business called Enterprise. Where is it? Enterprise something. Mobility, which for some reason, we talked about this when we did the earnings. Every quarter, they call out the exact number of seats they have. And so, some percentage of Intune usage goes through Enterprise Mobility. Enterprise Mobility is a set of services built on top of Microsoft 365 that involves, among other things, Intune, right? So it's not just Intune, but some percentage of Intune is inside this business. That business has 256 million seats. It's been growing at double-digit percentages every quarter forever and ever and ever. It's never not grown that fast. It is 8.5 times the size of Jamf. It's not the only MDM thing in the world, but if it was, Jamf would have 11% market share, 11.7% usage share compared to enterprise mobility, which again is not all of Intune. So I see a future where Microsoft actually dominates the enterprise. I know, Nostradamus. I know.
You're crazy talk, Mr. Sherrod, honestly.
But here's the thing. I do think there's an interesting case to be made. I'm here for Windows. Like Windows is my thing, right? But imagine a world in which Windows continues to decline. Imagine a world in which other device types become more popular over time. What does this world look like for Microsoft? This is a pretty good world. It's a lot like the world where Xbox is no longer hardware, because this allows Microsoft to play to its strength, which is cloud-based services, and service a bigger audience overall than when they dominated the market with this one product that had kind of a limited size to it compared to what we have today. So if Jamf is right, and Apple devices, I think it's going to be Apple devices and Google devices and Samsung devices and Google services and whatever else. But if Apple is just sort of wins on the hardware side somehow, if the Mac, which has been stuck at 7% usage market share, for the past several years, despite Apple Silicon, suddenly surges, double digits, takes over Microsoft, Windows, whatever, I think Microsoft still wins this world, because Microsoft's goal is to get everyone on a subscription service where you get paid every month, where it gets paid every month. And instead of you buying an on-prem server, one time upfront cost, whatever, you service it yourself. You pay for that, of course, but Microsoft doesn't really get too much out of that. They've kind of moved the model here. And in this world that this man invented, this science fiction and wishful thinking, I think Microsoft wins this world too. So, I mean, maybe he's right.
In his defense, he's not saying Microsoft is doomed. He's just saying it's not going to be a Windows-centric world. I don't think in 10 years. I don't think that necessarily.
Yeah, but he also says Apple's going to win the enterprise.
That I don't think. Apple's not going to ever win the enterprise. But
it's
you could dream.
It's not a Windows-centric world now.
That's right.
It's what Satya Nadella's been saying since his tenure began.
Right. Yeah. And the simple math on this is when Microsoft ruled the world and when Windows ruled the world, when Windows was personal computing, you could go back and look at a Microsoft quarterly earnings statement, annual earnings statement. You can see how much they made, how much profit it was, how much, whatever. And you can compare it to just the more personal computing business at Microsoft today, which I keep telling people is the smallest business at Microsoft.
Right.
And I guarantee you that today's more personal computing business isn't just larger, isn't just bigger by revenue. It is almost exponentially bigger. That the numbers that Microsoft reported in the late 90s and early 2000s today look so infinitesimally small as to be humorous. And like I think it was a quarter I just saw, I can't remember the exact year, but very early 2000s, $5 billion in revenues for the whole company. And it was a blockbuster, record-setting quarter. More personal computing last quarter by itself was $13 billion, all by itself, and it was the smallest part of Microsoft. So
yeah.
I am very tempted to bring to you the little rant that Steve Gibson did yesterday.
Okay.
He had just read David Heinemeier Hanson's blog. Remember that 37 Signals and Hey, their whole company spent millions on the cloud, and he said, "Cloud's over. It's stupid. I'm going to run everything on-prem." And Steve used this as, I think, a clarion call to everybody should move off the cloud and go on-prem.
Steve did. Really?
Yeah, well, he said, look, he runs a colo, which is another kind of antiquated idea. He has
a colo?
He has his own hardware.
I used to use a colo in 1996 in San Jose.
He's got his own hardware in level 3, but he owns the hardware. So I said, well, that's kind of the cloud. He said, no, that's not a cloud.
No, unlike the cloud, it depreciates.
But he says,
what are you talking about?
He says, why should you rent computer capability when you can own it? I guess
because you don't need it all the time.
That's kind of that was the point I made. I said, well, look at AI. You need a lot of capability to generate the model. He said, yes, exactly. But then you can run the model locally.
Wow, this is I love
He's a little old-fashioned.
He's a little old-fashioned.
Yeah.
There's cloud the hardware and the product, and there's cloud the architecture.
This is coming up because of AI. AI has forced us to, for the millionth time, do this evaluation that we always do when something big happens, where we debate the pros and the cons. And if you get caught up in the cons, you stop seeing the pros.
Oh, that's
right?
a good point.
It's like,
yeah.
It's like when cars arrived and like all of a sudden people aren't using horses for transportation or whatever. And of course, like the horse guys are like, horses are always going to be around. You guys are stupid. Like,
well, they weren't wrong. You could still ride a horse.
You still can.
Not in the town,
of course you can.
But you
No.
You know what I'm saying?
Hard to find a hitching post these days.
Not in Petaluma. For some reason, people have kept their hitching posts. So
I
they're
love it.
all
There's
over
the-
town. It's very quaint.
Deadwood, which is a fantastic TV show
loved
that
it.
ended too
Yeah.
soon, had a great scene where they're standing out on the porch and the swear engine says, "What's going on over there?" And they're putting in the poles for the telegraph.
Right.
And this is not in the same episode, but there's an exchange where I don't understand what is this, and it's basically about instant communication. That when you get a message, you can reply right back. And he said, "Why would I want to reply right back? I need time to formulate my response." And he didn't understand the point of it.
Right.
But of course, that type of thing is transformative, and this is what technology does. It makes things that weren't possible before possible. It makes technology that brought Phoenix water, which we're now running out of, is what made it possible to put a gigantic city in a place where there was no water. That's technology. That's what it does. Now, in that case, we might argue that was bad, but
It has consequences.
yes. But the goal, like I think I just said this last week, is the net sum of this should be that the positives outweigh the negatives, and that's how you define progress, right? And that's what technology is at its heart, is about driving progress, however you want to define it.
Yeah.
I like your idea. If you focus too much on the negative, you'll miss the positive. I think I'm maybe guilty of that with AI.
Well, I am made a career out of focusing on the negative, so I'm really good at it. So I sort of recognize it.
Yeah.
Negativity for fun and profit.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, you love to be
John C.
disappointed,
Dvorak
right?
was the poster boy for that.
Yeah.
His default was, that's no good. Nobody wants that.
Right.
And 99% of the time he was right, because that's often right. But he missed, he hated the mouse when it came out. No one wants to use a mouse.
That's amazing.
It's a classic.
Take your hand off the keyboard. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
That's
and there are
amazing.
still people, by the way, who feel that way. I understand that. But
I very
the
much
mouse-
try to keep my hands on the keyboard. I bought the first mouse I could the first second it was available.
I think it's here to
still
stay.
necessary.
I don't think it's going
think
anywhere.
Maybe.
Yep. Anyway, I forgot what we were talking about there, but it's
we were talking about Steve's rant. I don't want to bring it back. To
Oh,
that,
yeah.
on the cloud.
I don't look. People who are on tech podcasts don't have to always be futurists, and they don't always have to be Luddites. We can, you as intelligent people, or whoever as intelligent people, can evaluate things and make their own decisions, and maybe some things fall on one side of the coin or the other. I mean, you don't want to be too starry-eyed about it.
No, and I would
right.
say, defending Steve, that his attitude is because, remember, he's focused on security. Tried and true is almost always going to be more secure.
Hey, here's a story from 2023. Google is thinking about doing an air gap for some of their engineers.
I saw that.
I mean, what are we talking about?
As an experiment.
In 1996, Microsoft got some military certification for Windows NT for security that only applied when the computer was not connected to anything in the room by itself with a lock on the door.
It's secure.
Like,
now it is.
It's secure now. I mean, encased it in cement, it will be even more secure.
They are. I think that the when I read the article, they're going to be allowed the intranet. They're going to be allowed access to the Google network, just not to the outside world, because But you know what? Google's intranet is so vast, and all the code.
Is there porn on the intranet? I mean, we got to make sure it's at least a facsimile of the internet.
I was thinking of making my employees all use HP35 calculators just as an experiment. Let's see how that. Let's see how that works.
And they're all going to put them upside down so it says boob or something.
You
or
see? The human mind. Ladies and gentlemen, I rest my case.
They're going to find the toilet
Simple
every
things.
time. It does,
Simple
every
things.
time. All right. Let's take a little break. You did the AMD story, right?
I did.
So let's take a little break because I see the next segment is going to be about Microsoft 365.
Yeah.
And this might be a very good time to talk about our fine sponsor. They sponsor the studios. ACI Learning and IT Pro merged, and that's really been an amazing journey for both and is giving you as a customer so many more options. I'll give you an example. Managed service providers, MSPs. Now, Russell, who's I see in our parking lot, he's here. He's always here on lunch day, actually. He's here every Wednesday. It's just a coincidence, I'm sure. But he runs a team of techs, right? Those techs need to be up to date on all of the latest technology. The best way to do it, ACI Learning. For a number of reasons. Of course, they're getting the content, they're getting the learning, but they're also enjoying it. They love it. They're entertained while they train. It's short format content, 7,200 hours now to choose from. That's a big jump. Plus, it's on demand, which means MSP teams can train when it's convenient for them. And they're short enough, you could do it during a lunch break or, on the way home. You can listen in the car, that kind of thing. You already know the name IT Pro, I know. Now part of ACI Learning, IT Pro's expanded capabilities provide more support for MSP teams by keeping their courses updated in all areas of IT. That includes, yes, Microsoft Cloud, AWS, CompTIA, and so much more. One proud MSP leader said, quote, I had 110 engineers in the field, not unusual, right? We had dozens of IT Pro accounts. Last year alone, they passed over 40 certs. That's a great feeling. It means your teams are engaged, they're learning, they're getting better all the time. One of the ways we know that ACI Learning's content is good is its completion rate. It's 50% higher than the industry average because people enjoy the videos and they're engaging and informative. It's the sweet spot. MSPs also love the practice labs where they can test and experiment before deploying new apps or updates without compromising the live system. They love those practice labs because, it's a great place to try stuff with no cost, no risk, right? In fact, if you set up a Windows server, Windows clients, you can do it in an HTML5 browser and something goes wrong, you close the tab. That's what I do. And poof, it's gone. Also, the MSPs love the practice tests. Take the exam before you take the real thing. It's a great way to prepare. ACI Learning has a new tool. They call it Insights. This is very handy. It identifies your team's weaknesses, which gives management and frankly, team members the assessments they need to decide what to do in their professional development, what courses to take, what areas to work on. You can identify skills gaps, empower your team, personalize your training, all to protect and improve your business. ACI Learning, it keeps your business from risking redundancy by consistently offering the most up-to-date certifications and courses available. Provides you with a personal account manager to make sure you aren't wasting anyone's time. Your account manager works with you to ensure your team only focuses on the skills that matter to your organization, so you can leave redundant training behind. ACI Learning also holds ISO certification, so you know you're receiving the world-class training your team deserves. Keep your team's IT skills current. Visit go.acilearning.com/twit. Twit listeners will receive at least 20% off and as much as 65% off. It all depends on how big your team is on the IT Pro Enterprise Solution Plan. Just fill out the form. You're going to get a quote that's right for you, so you'll know how much you're going to save ahead of time. Go.acilearning.com/twit. Of course, for individuals, but for teams too, nothing beats ACI Learning. Go.acilearning.com/twit. We thank them so much for supporting Windows Weekly. All right, gentlemen, let us move to Microsoft 365. What do you say?
I'll tell you what I say. This
What do you
is the
say?
golden age of antitrust, and I love it.
No, you don't.
I can't get enough of
Don't
antitrust.
lie. You hate Lena Khan.
No, I'm not kidding. I love everything about it. There's a topic that's going to come up twice today, which is definition of market, right? So one of the tools that antitrust regulators have when they try to charge, in this case, like a big tech company with abusing a monopoly or whatever it might be, is that they can narrowly or broadly define a market as they wish to prove their point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you could say Apple has a 100% monopoly on app distribution on iOS.
It's true.
Right? There's the market.
Pretty much.
To which Apple would say, yeah, but hold on a second. We're only some percentage of the broader market for smartphones. And we're not even the biggest maker of smartphones. Samsung is. So what the heck?
Not the largest operating system. If you actually combine all the Androids, like.
Yep. Yeah. So anyway, the definition of a market is kind of what you want it to be. It's like lying with data. You can define it however you want. So obviously the company involved is going to try to define, in this case, to define a market broadly to make themselves look smaller. And the antitrust regulator will try to define it narrowly to make it look like you're more dominant than you are. So with that idea in mind, the EU announced this past, I think it was last Friday, probably late last week, that they are indeed going to go forward with a formal investigation into Microsoft bundling Teams with Office. It's actually in Microsoft 365, right? In the subscription offerings. They actually don't care about standalone versions of Office. So if you go to a retail store like it's the 1990s and you buy a copy of Office, nobody cares about that.
Can you do that? I don't even think you can do that.
I don't know. It's like I've heard people do it. I don't know. I think the most common way to buy a standalone version of Office today, honestly, is like some online discount thing where you can get like a lifetime access to Office 2021 for just $39 or $49 or whatever the nonsense is.
Right.
You can only install it on one computer. It's never updated like the Microsoft 365 versions of the app. It's not really a great deal. But some people, Steve Gibson's in this conversation kind of still prefer that. I'm not dumping on it. It's not what I would do. But
give me my media, dang it.
Yeah. So 3 years ago, Slack, right before they were purchased by Salesforce, literally less than 6 months before, I believe, issued a complaint to the European Commission asking them to investigate Microsoft for this exact business practice. I've written an extensive kind of rebuttal to this whole thing. But the idea here is that the European Commission is not saying that Microsoft's guilty. That will come later if it happens. Right now, they are going to assess whether Microsoft may have breached EU competition rules, in their words, by tying or bundling Teams with its popular suites for Office 365 and Microsoft 365, right? So this, again, I think comes down to this kind of definition of market. Like, what's the market here?
Why is a bundle is a bundle? Why is Teams just not part of the bundle like everything else? Like, how are you discriminating these two things?
Yeah. So the way you
plain that words in there.
Yeah. No. So monopoly and antitrust is all about size, right? So if you are the dominant player in a market, if you have a monopoly or are otherwise dominant, because again, everything in antitrust is pretty squishy, you are beholden to different rules than an up and coming small company. So in like this market, Slack was a small player. It still has a minority market share compared to Teams, or I should say usage share, right? The number of seats or whatever it is out in the world. There are lots of parallels between this case and the Microsoft antitrust stuff of the late 90s, early 2000s, right? Bundling Internet Explorer with Windows. Same idea. We're trying to get into this new market. We're bundling to get ahead. We're leveraging this dominant product that we have. It sounds very similar. But man, does this thing fall apart when you really look at it? And I hope the EU looks at it to this degree. So among the problems with this case is that Teams is not actually a brand new thing that Microsoft created because it heard of something called Slack, although that certainly was an inspiration for them to go in a certain direction with the functionality. Teams is the successor.
They did try and buy Slack at one point.
They did, which, by the way, also speaks to that's a thing that monopolies try to do, right? They tried to buy Netscape too, by the way, and when that failed, they went to the bundling thing. So that's actually a parallel, and that's an important one to remember. But Microsoft had solutions dating back over 20-something years that were this product. Lync, Skype for Business, et cetera, et cetera. Like the original name of Teams, if I'm not mistaken, I think was Skype Teams. I think that was the original internal name for this product.
Right.
And to your point, when Microsoft tried to buy, or was talking about buying Slack, I think for about $8 billion, Bill Gates was one of the big voices that said, "Are you crazy? You have everything in place that you need to beat this thing right now.
To make it.
You already have it." The other thing is that Slack and Microsoft 365 commercial largely target different segments of the market. That is, most of the revenues and most of the companies that Microsoft attracts are what I would call Fortune 500 or enterprise type businesses, Where Slack gets into that part of the market, I don't have a good name for this, but it's new and small businesses. It's the people who are younger, who came up in a world where they were using Google services at school and probably Google devices, frankly, like Chromebooks and things like that. And they are doing this kind of ad hoc thing where they're like, I'm going to use Notion because it's free or cheap. I'm going to use Slack because it's free or cheap, depending on, the size of your company.
Yep.
They don't look at big infrastructure like Microsoft has, right?
Yeah.
So you could make this argument. Yeah, I mean, they bundled Teams with Microsoft 365, no doubt about it. They bundled a bunch of things into Microsoft 365 that never garnered a response from anybody or a complaint from anybody, but whatever. They already had something that wasn't called Teams that was Teams before, right? So they've always had a communication collaboration slice in there, way before Slack ever existed. You could argue, I mean, Slack's big innovation, I'm not saying they invented it, but the thing that they rode to success on was that younger people prefer more immediate forms of communication collaboration,
right?
Whereas older people prefer email, right? So one of the central disconnects between a company like that would be a Microsoft shop and a company that might be a Slack shop is that kind of age experience difference.
And when you get as old as me, you don't want to hear from anybody at all in any form.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. You just turn off notifications. Right. Yeah. That's the third level. That's the next level marketing.
Hey, what?
So, right. Why did my phone make a sound? I thought I turned that all off. So one of I think the big successes of Teams, aside from and I should say, one of the other big differences between Teams and Slack is that, the first version of Teams was very much like Slack, sort of a chat focused collaboration tool that built off the stuff they already had. But very, very quickly, this thing added so much more functionality. It's a full platform. It runs apps. It's a completely different kind of thing. I actually think, and this is where the definition of market comes in, I don't think these things compete in the same market. I really don't. I don't think they compete with each other. The pace of innovation, the amount of innovation that Microsoft demonstrated, and by the way, before the pandemic, like the pandemic was absolutely, I've described it this way so many times. Stephen Rose and I had this conversation about, and I mean in 2020, that the pandemic would and did act as an accelerant for industry trends that were already happening. And so in Microsoft's case, they did a tremendous job of bringing in this new type of solution, the Slack type of solution, into their productivity suite that could integrate with the way people were already doing things. And so you could have these organizations full of younger and older people, and we could collaborate on the same projects in the way that we preferred. It's kind of it's honestly a form of innovation of its own kind. The thing is, the EU in this case called out COVID. They actually made a point that COVID played a big role in this. The reason being that Teams usage exploded during COVID, and Slack usage did not to the same degree. So the numbers I found was in March 2020, they're right at the start of the March 2020 is when you were trying to get home from my house in the
beginning of the lockdowns.
Yep. There were 44 million Teams users. So that's 2017. That's in 6 years. They got to 44 million users, right? The world locked down in 2020. Since then, and this is 3 years, Microsoft's added another 256 million users. So there's over 300 million users of this thing.
Right.
Let me see if I can find the figure for Slack. Where is it? I can't find it.
But
I have a figure in here. So it's a small fraction. Yeah. No, here it is. Numbers are vague because different people. No, it's somewhere between 30 and 40 million.
Okay.
Daily active users. So it went up. But here's the thing. COVID was that thing that lifted a lot of boats in the tech sphere. It is fascinating to me that some companies benefited greatly, Zoom, for example, and some didn't. And Slack is one of the ones that didn't. And so when you look at like what happened with Slack, first of all, they were purchased by Salesforce before the pandemic. So they have all the resources of a ginormous company. Yeah. Just like AOL purchased Netscape, kind of undercutting the we can't compete thing. Well, if you can't compete, then why were you worth whatever billion you were worth to Salesforce? And it was multiple billions, by the way, whatever it was. AOL bought Netscape in that's the wrong year. And it doesn't matter for $4.2 billion during the Microsoft trial. Salesforce bought Slack in 2020 for $28 billion. That is over 3 times the amount Microsoft was going to pay for it 3 years earlier.
Yeah.
It grew in value enormously.
Yeah.
All of these things,
tell me where you're sad.
Yeah,
I don't. That hurt you. I mean, that being said, the EU should do the investigation. I just suspect the investigation should come back and say, "Tough luck, Buttercup."
This is in the same way. Look, the Microsoft Activision Blizzard deal was is a huge thing. It needs regulatory oversight. Every one of those agencies needed to do it.
And even the 10-year thing is not a bad idea. Like declare that you're going to address this.
Honestly, that's what's
platform problem.
That's what's going to push it through.
Yeah.
So on the but this is the same thing. I feel strongly this needs to be looked at. Mm-hmm. And when I looked at it, I came up with all that nonsense I dispute it. So I sort of looked at all the points they were making, the questions they were asking, and there's probably more in the article. It's a huge article, but there's a lot of kind of back and forth. But I mean, ultimately, I think did Microsoft create Teams because of Slack? Yes. Yep. There's nothing wrong with.
Well, and also that their customers wanted a collaborative tool, right? Yep. I mean, that's why they were considering buying it in the first place. We need a collaborative tool.
The central harm to Slack's business, I guess, is that Microsoft, by not charging extra for Teams, is giving companies an incentive not to spend extra on Slack because we already get this thing for free. So even if it's not as good, there's an anti-competitive element to that, and that's fair.
Right.
The problem is Teams is much better than Slack. It's much bigger than Slack, at least.
It is now.
It's more akin to the type of solution that managed enterprises would want.
Yes. Because they are reacting to their customers.
That's right. It fits in nicely with the entire ecosystem that is Microsoft 365. Mm-hmm. It is, like I said, an apps platform now. It is, it's a floor wax and
a dessert topping. Yes.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
And we've done shows on dev for Slack, like your ability to add functionality to it, to customize it the way you want to. Like, it happens to also be a chat tool.
Yes.
But that's not its principal thing.
We saw this thing that people liked in Slack, and we said, that's interesting. We have this whole suite of collaboration and communication experiences, which at this time were called Skype for Business. Mm-hmm. We could add that feature. This is the thing I always said, Call of Duty, right? The biggest shooter for 15 years running or whatever. And then all of a sudden, these battle royale games showed up.
Yeah.
PUBG, and then the big one, Fortnite. Fortnite just destroyed the market.
Yes. And they weren't the first. PUBG
no, they weren't the first, but for some reason that one landed, right?
Yeah.
And so from the perspective of a Call of Duty user, which in this case is the Microsoft 365 side of this fence, I said, and they did, I said, what is this? Why is this even big? This isn't a game, it's a feature. This is a type of game they could easily add to Call of Duty and have it be one of the 117 types of games you can play within Call of Duty. By the way, that's exactly what they did. It's called Warzone. They give it away for free, just like Microsoft does with standalone teams if you want it. And it's part of this bigger thing called Call of Duty that you pay for. So here's this giant thing that's expensive that has Warzone as a feature, competing sort of against this thing called Fortnite, which is free, which is like Slack, a small thing, And I'm sorry, did Activision Blizzard leverage some dominance they have in the first person shooter market and blah, 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 blah? Yes. But they haven't beaten Fortnite, interestingly, right?
Yeah.
Warzone is hugely successful. I don't know the numbers, but there's millions and millions of people play this thing every single day, but it has not defeated Fortnite.
No.
So what's the difference between Fortnite and Slack, aside from the fact that Fortnite is free? It's that those people continue innovating. And this is the thing where Netscape dropped the ball in the browser wars that people don't like to talk about because it's all about abuse. But I feel like Slack dropped the ball too. When Microsoft made the teams more than Slack kept Slack. And that's one way to compete. I'm sure some people like that small little one thing type solution. Ad hoc,
now that
whatever.
They've had 6 years inside of Salesforce, they really have no excuse. You're on a platform that actually needed all that capability too.
Right. So, I mean, Microsoft is dominant in the space. I agree with that. They did bundle the product. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think that the differences in the markets that they actually target I would
argue their customers expect the product suite to keep growing. That's why they pay every month.
Exactly. That's the central promise of it. We just talked about standalone Office, right? Mm-hmm. Why would anyone do this? One of the things you don't get with standalone Office is all the functional updates.
Yeah.
Microsoft literally updates all parts of Office and Office 365 and Microsoft 365 every single month.
Yeah.
When you buy standalone Office, you get
almost
security
weekly.
updates. Yeah, it's crazy. That's the promise of it. That's why people pay that fee.
Yeah.
And or it's one of the reasons, right? Slack doesn't. Slack. I'm sure Slack improves. I don't mean it like that, but Slack is this. It's a really narrow product that does one specific thing, and only small companies would ever gravitate towards something like that because you don't pick stuff out of the air and choose this for this, this for this, and kind of hope they all integrate. When you're a big company, you just don't.
Yeah,
that's not of interest.
That's the customers want one throat to choke, right? They want it to come from one place.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
that's funny. Anyway, so that's happening. I like Richard said. I don't know that I would say expect, but I think the proper outcome of this investigation is to say that yes, Microsoft exhibited some of the expected behaviors of a dominant, party in a business. However, Slack made mistakes. That the definition of the market that these two products compete in, which I think is the most important bit, frankly, is completely different.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of it. You can write words with Notepad or you can write words with Microsoft Word. Do they compete with each other? I know they're both Microsoft products. Not exactly. But, Slack is to Notepad as Teams is to Word. Of course, it's a much more powerful, complete package with more features and it does a lot more.
Yeah.
So that's my take.
Yeah, it's going to be a failure to compete. You don't get to use anti-competitive because you failed to compete.
Yeah, right. Failing to even try to compete might be their biggest sin, because I feel like that's what happened. But
yeah,
that's my take on it. By the way, I use Slack and Teams every single day.
Yep.
I like Slack for what it is.
Sure.
Wish I didn't have.
Mistake to say that it's only Slack or only Sony and the Activision thing. I mean, could it also be? Well, I'm saying could it also be the anti-competitiveness stifles any new competitor as well? I mean, aren't they supposed to be looking at that too? I mean, it's not. So
so many things come to mind. I'll just use one example, one quickie one. Microsoft got into trouble with with antivirus vendors when they started talking about it and then implementing antivirus and anti-malware in Windows.
Right.
Microsoft, through its inaction, created a huge business for companies like Norton and Symantec and whatever else to come out with products that fixed a problem that Microsoft created in Windows. They went back and forth on this for a while. I suspect there was some financial something that happened, but the basic deal was that these companies, by the way, still exist. There's almost no reason, if what you need is spyware, malware, virus, whatever, control in Windows, to buy a product. So why do they still exist? How could they be there? We already have this in Windows. It's because they expanded into other areas of security and privacy, and they offer a bunch of other functionality. I don't personally need or want that kind of thing. I don't like the overhead of it. But to some people, a lot of people, these businesses are doing pretty good. That's an option for you, right? You can buy McAfee, whatever it is.
Well, that's the platform model. And I think if you said Microsoft was a pure platform play and didn't provide end-user products, they would do even better. They would be even more stimulating to the economy.
I guess what I'm saying is when Microsoft turned Teams into a platform, Slack's response was to do nothing.
Right.
So, if you just want to keep doing the old thing, where your entire product is a feature of something that Microsoft gives away for free as part of Microsoft 365. I mean, God love you. There is a market out there for Slack. And that market is that small business thing I was talking about. Startups, new businesses, small businesses. Whatever.
Yeah. I work with folks that are using the Google Suite for stuff, and they use Slack as their chat and collab too. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Right. That's what I'm saying. You're kind of picking it. If Google were to add a Slack-like feature to Workspace,
to the G Suite,
probably have actually, but whatever, Slack could not sue them because Google does not have a dominant position in this market. In any market you choose to define there, right? They're a minority player in office productivity or whatever. So it's stupid for Google not to. I wouldn't be surprised to discover they already have. I actually don't know, but. I don't care either. I would never use that. But Workspace is a great example of the same type of business that small businesses are looking at. They're like, I'm going to use these guys for email and documents. Maybe I'm going to use these guys. Like I might use Notion for note taking. I'm going to take Slack for collaboration. And I've collected these ad hoc tools that probably have some integration pieces for sure, but they're not as deeply integrated as that one neck to choke, as you put it, the Microsoft full stack infrastructure, essential service sitting there on the back end. I think these are different things. I mean, those businesses are going to grow up, by the way, and it's possible that the app service providers that they use will grow with them, right?
I really question what's the remedy at this point, too. Slack has already been acquired. You're really going to, charge Microsoft a fine? Like, where does this go?
Yeah, so this is based, I don't want to call it rumors, because I believe it was the Financial Times that reported this 2-3 months ago. But apparently, when this was a sort of a smaller, not unofficial, but not the informal investigation, we'll call it, they alerted Microsoft, and Microsoft said, what's the problem? And they said, well, you're doing this thing to Slack. I mean, well, okay, what do you want us to do? And they were like, raise the cost of Office when you include Teams. So Microsoft was like, all right. And they sent in a submission where they said, we will raise it by this much. And the EU said that's not enough. And that's why this formal investigation started, because they couldn't reach a settlement ahead of time. They just couldn't reach, it was a number. And so if that's true, and I think it is, based on the source, that means that it basically came down to a per user monthly dollar amount, essentially.
Right.
The difference in price between a version of Microsoft 365 without Teams and one with Teams was not enough.
Yeah.
And by the way, who are we helping here? So you're going to help a competitor by raising the price of a product to customers? I mean, okay.
Yeah.
And by
I
the
remember when antitrust was about harm to the consumer.
Depends,
right?
It's a matter of perspective. The EU is heavily on competition. They want fair competition above consumer, but above like user, huh? Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, little pro, little con there, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, I think that's insane. Okay. So that's that. I don't know too much about this story or why you would necessarily need this, but Microsoft, just today, I didn't get a chance to look into this deeply, but they added spatial audio support for meetings to Microsoft Teams.
No, I could tell you
another feature that.
No, that's cool.
Oh.
So we're in a meeting with 6 people, and when Joe's talking, he's over here, and when you're talking, you're over there. So everybody's placed within the sound sphere. So
I don't
it's
like
you're sitting at I'm again.
Well, no, I'll tell you. I'll tell you why. So one thing, when we moved into the last house we're in, we have a sound bar on the TV, and I put rears. We use Sonos stuff, so it's like little Sonos ones, and we put them in the rear. And we tried that for like a week or so, and for the rest of the 6 years we were there, we did not use those speakers in that capacity. So when we moved here, and I couldn't remember why, right? So we moved into this apartment. I was like, hey, we don't have as many rooms to put speakers in. I think I'll put those speakers in the rear again. And you actually can kind of see one up here. It's a little IKEA version of a Sonos one, whatever they call it, Samant, or whatever.
Yeah, I see it, yeah.
And I said, okay, let's do this again. Like, I don't know why we weren't doing surround sound. Surround sound's cool. Surround sound's terrible. and here's why. Because it's something I should love. But the truth is, in 90-something%.
You really are an old man, Paul.
No, I'll explain this. No, I have a reason. I listen, I love Star Wars and movies. I want stuff all around me. I love that stuff, right? The helicopter blows by. It was, awesome. Like, who wouldn't want that? But the vast majority of the content that we enjoy, TV shows, whatever, surround sound is very infrequent, and it's always weird. Like, you'll be watching a show, sound effects, dialogue, and then all of a sudden music will swell behind you.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And you're like, what's going on? Like, what is that?
Lisa always thinks there's somebody at the door because
exactly.
Speaker fire.
So I don't have anywhere else to put these speakers, honestly. I could just not use them. But like, I find it to be more annoying more often than it is beneficial.
Maybe that's the fault of the people making it. I mean, imagine if you're at a meeting and everybody is in a different place in the room. I am. That's exactly what I imagine. So imagine this. You're in a meeting, right? There's this guy, Bob. He doesn't talk a lot. We're all talking. We're doing interaction. It's in some kind of a 3D space. Now there's a voice behind you over here. It's Bob. And he's like, hey. And you're like, what the
It is like, why do I want people around me? Like, that's weird. I already do this. Like, this is haunting me when I enjoy stuff. Now you want it to haunt me when I'm working? I'm not sure this is a good idea.
I mean, when surround sound works, you don't even realize it works. Like, it just shapes it. What you're pointing out is when it works poorly. And one of the reasons,
ham-handed most of the time. Yeah.
I think it's usually not the show itself. It's the simulators. You have those speakers, and so the system tries to come up with a way to use them.
Right. Ideally, I would have a series of speakers, and it would be a smoother kind of a transition. But all I have is front and back, so it's like bam, bam. It's like dumb. It's just,
listen, we have sound bars now with audio shaping.
That's right.
Just buy a sound bar.
Dolby Atmos.
Get rid of the back speakers.
Exactly. Yep.
And the biggest thing the sound bar does right is when there is surround sound, it knows how to bounce it around. You give the effect, and when there isn't surround sound, it doesn't do it.
I tell you, if anyone surprises me in a meeting like that, the next time I meet that person in person, I'm going to punch him right in the face.
This is something
not putting up with that.
We do this on .NET Rocks, right? That my voice tends to be left biased. Mm-hmm. Carl's voice is right biased. The guest is more centered, and it's to create the effect that you're sitting at a table overhearing a conversation.
Right, I like that. We've played with that.
But that's a stereo effect, essentially.
Yeah. Well, it's same different. It's spatial. It gives a sense of space.
All right. Well, I haven't tried this. I mean, this is. I just, as soon as I saw this, I thought of this surround sound thing, and I thought, this is if done poorly, this could bite you in the.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So we'll see. Maybe it will be literally spatial, like everyone's in front of you. But some of the kind of meeting room stuff they came up with during the pandemic, I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's like you're in a crowd in a in the theater or whatever. There are people behind you, and I don't know.
Yeah. No, you want it to make your eyes point to the right direction on the screen in front of you. A little left bias or a little right bias. So you tend to be able to find the voice correctly. If it does any more than that, you have my clearance to stab people. It's fine.
I also think we need put you guys in the stereo left and right. So anybody listening at home in stereo, suddenly Paul has diminished into the corner. and Richard
calling him Bob.
And Richard's playing the role of Bob, jumping out of nowhere.
What are you, a serial killer? What do you want?
Do people like that? I don't know. I mean, we've played with it. By the way, I'm in the center, as I should be. We've played with that, but I think it's distracting a little bit. So maybe that's what you're saying.
If you do, the whole point is you're not supposed to notice. It's supposed to feel natural.
I made it too extreme. All right, let me tone it down.
Because it's also not natural? Mono. Mono's not natural either.
Well, yeah. I feel like most of the podcasts I listen to are probably mono.
Yeah. Listen, I've been making a show for 20-something years with a guy who actually has an education in audio engineering. Like, I'm not going to argue.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying. I mean, I didn't mean it like that. I mean, I suspect the ones I listen to mostly are.
A lot of people just don't think about this stuff. They really don't.
Yeah.
At one point we did a true Dolby surround. This was when Dolby had a technology called headphone surround, and we actually had a Dolby engineer come in and we recorded it in headphone surround, which most people can't hear. Frankly, you have to have a special decoder and stuff.
Yeah.
It was fun. So I will leave the rest of the show. I'll leave you, Richard, slightly in the right.
Okay.
And I'll leave Paul slightly in the left. It does help. What it does
a little
do,
shape. A little shape.
It helps you distinguish speakers a little bit, which is
absolutely
nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Tell me what you think, folks. I don't even know.
I didn't mean for this to be controversial. I'm sorry.
We may not offer our shows in stereo because that doubles the size of the file.
It does.
Oh, yeah.
So we may, I don't know. I'll have to. Patrick, what are we? I think we're stereo in some places, but I'm not sure. I don't know.
So you don't offer like a mono or stereo choice?
No, I think, I obviously, and maybe this is less important now, but
it's an audio file. It's
still pretty small, but in the early days, people were concerned about that. Steve Gibson still offers a 16 kilobit version of the show.
Yeah, but how many
sounds like
cycles
Thomas
is he eating
Edison
up on
a
his
cylinder.
He's using his he's got like his on-prem infrastructure is grinding away overnight.
Yeah.
spitting out a 16K audio
Even
file.
our engineer, Patrick Delahanty, says, I forget.
It still works on a compact
checking.
iPack. That's the standard.
Yeah.
Well, because I really don't want to overstress my 56K modem. So listen.
There were people at one time who were bandwidth impaired, we called them. And we did offer that 16 kilobit version.
The first few years of .NET Rocks, primary listening method was burning to CDR. We made the format fit on CDRs so they could listen in their car.
I had to keep shows to 70 minutes for that reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Which clearly has gone by the wayside.
Back when we used to write it to acetate, we could only do 40 minutes before the ad.
I always thought it'd be fun. I agree with you, Richard, that I always thought it should have some spatiality.
Give it a little shape. Shape is good.
But I just don't know. I don't know who gets it that way, to be honest.
Yeah.
Or who cares? Tell me if you care. Oh, Patrick says our audio files are mono.
Files are mono. Question is answered.
And the reason is it's half as big. Even if you don't
Patrick
use both
says,
channels, you have to have enough bandwidth for two channels.
Well, you wouldn't, you don't want to stress out that gigabit Ethernet you've got. Like, be very careful.
We got listeners in all sorts of situations. I don't want to make them suffer for a minor.
By the way, a lot of people are going to be on cell streaming in the car or something like that. It's nice to keep it down. I mean,
video, Patrick says he thinks video is stereo, and I think the stream is stereo.
Interesting.
I have to ask John about that one, but he's busy enjoying his chicken vindaloo. So
nice.
It was Indian today.
As you do.
As you do.
Should we talk about Sean in the Discord and the unhappy education folks?
Oh, yeah. So somebody told me that Google did something like this recently as well. And I will say that Microsoft's rationale for this teeters on the edge of incredulity because they keep talking about security and all these other things. And it's like, the real reason is storage is expensive. So
there's never been unlimited storage. It's not actually a thing.
Yeah. So Microsoft 365 for Education is kind of a group of products. There is a set of subscription offerings where I actually don't know this for sure, but my belief would be that they probably mirrored what they do with the commercial and consumer offerings, which is every user gets a terabyte of storage. I would imagine something like that. As of 1 year from now, all school tenants are going to receive 100 terabytes of free pooled storage across OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange, right? Meaning, so your email is going to be in there as well, right? Little controversy there, but with an additional of 50 or 100 gigabytes of pooled storage per paid user for A3 and A5 subscriptions, respectively. This means that schools are going to have to manage storage a lot more than they don't do it now at all.
They don't need to at all because it's free and quote unquote unlimited.
Apparently, most schools don't use even a tiny portion of what they were offering before anyway. And you can purchase additional incremental storage or move to Azure if you want something more cost effective. So that's their kind of the bone they're throwing. There's also a set of offerings that Microsoft has had called Office 365 A1 and A1 Plus. And these are free subscriptions for schools that qualify because they can't afford to pay for a paid offering, right? So you qualify for this. The difference between the two was that A1 was the web apps and A1 Plus was the desktop apps, the whole suite. And this was so if your school qualified, every student, every teacher got Office 365 plus the download desktop apps for free.
Right.
They're getting rid of that. So there's no more a plus. So now going forward, they're going to have, after the license expires in about a year or less, depending on where you were, you will be moved, or you can move, I should say, to Office 365 A1, which is the web app version, right? Still free. Or you can get a significant discount off of the commercial pricing of Office 3 or Microsoft 365, whichever version of, they're probably called A1, A3, A5, I think.
Probably.
Something like that, yeah. And then the storage change is also coming to the A1 subscription. So again, I don't know what it is today. I'm guessing it was terabyte per user. The no-cost Office 365 A1 subscription will be like the others, 100 terabytes of pooled storage, effective February 1 in this case, but a maximum of 100 gigabytes per user. And again, this is the free one.
What you get with the free OneDrive accounts anyway. Although I've not found strictly enforced, right? If you go over, it makes sad noises at you, but it never stops you from having files.
Okay. Yeah. I think they're tightening the
I think after a while it starts really getting grumpy with you, but
yeah.
I think we're hitting the end of the road on it's just like unlimited bandwidth from your ISP, right? These are all lies. They've always been lies.
It's also
now the lies are being manifest.
I don't think any of this stuff started during the pandemic. I think some of these things are a decade or more old. I think these have been around for a while, but I do also feel as we leave the pandemic, the kind of tech freebie thing is, has been going away for over a year now, right? The Zoom stuff was a little more liberal. The Teams Premium now is chunked off into a paid service. Like some of that stuff was something we got for free during the pandemic. Like there were some niceties for those of us stuck at home during the pandemic from these companies. And I don't know, what's the phrase? Something's coming home to roost or something. I don't know what it is, but
the chickens. You want to have the chickens come home to roost?
The bill is coming home to roost, whatever it is. But
yes.
Yep. So
reality is upon us.
Yeah. It's the wake up call. It just feels like it feels like a bait and switch, obviously, I think, to users, to schools.
Any change does. Any change downward.
Yeah.
does.
Like you just gave this away for free, so you could do this to us now. And it's like, I don't think they're that
part of their argument
thing.
Also is people were abusing it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but that's, it's always hard to take away stuff. You got to be
judicious
about giving things away because then you cannot really, it's hard to take it away afterwards.
Yeah.
I know this for,
it's one of the real common conversations I have with sysadmins in the run-as context is controlling how much disk space employees consume wastefully, making copies of things over and over and over again just to make one change. That sort of stuff. So it's wildly.
I'm gonna write about this soon. I hope. I've got the structure of this, but just from like the perspective of an individual, where you have a terabyte of storage on OneDrive, and because this seems so vast and is never going to go away or whatever, you fill it, and then it's completely disorganized. And
it's a mess.
How do you fix something like this? It's very difficult. So it's kind of an interesting problem, but it's something people are going to want to get ahead of. It's not the same. Actually, we were landed on the plane coming home, and my wife's, your phone connected again, and she said, "Oh, I keep getting these messages from Google. I've hit my storage limit, and I need to go up to the next level." And I'm like, "Okay." And she's like, "Should I do that?" I'm like, what do you mean? What's your alternative? I mean, she was probably paying for 100 gigabytes, and so it was like $1 a month or $1.99, and now it's going to be 200 gigabytes, and it's going to be like $2.99 a month. It's like $1 a month or something.
Yeah,
and I was like,
think about this.
So that's not the same problem. But once you have filled like a terabyte of storage, it gets a little more complicated, especially on the Microsoft side. And at that point, you might want to evaluate what it is you've got up there, and if it's disorganized, which I think it is for a lot of people, it's going to take some work.
I keep talking about my house but you've actually never spent any time here. It's the other one. But we built a dedicated storage room under the deck that is of substantial size. It put floor to ceiling shelving on it.
Right.
And when that room was full, you have too much stuff.
Exactly.
Right. It was time to get rid of things.
So I mean, I don't remember the exact number, but the alleged size of the house that you visited where I lived was 3,500 square feet, whatever, not including the unfinished basement, which was over 1,000 square feet, and the 2-car garage, all of which were full of crap. And now we have to move this, I'll call it 5,000 square feet of stuff into an 1,100 square foot apartment. So I don't know how good you are at math, but I got to tell you, there's no version of that equation where this works.
Yeah.
And it's, you have to get rid of stuff. You just have to.
And let's be very clear. You didn't need it.
How do you GRO? I mean, do you call the junk kings, or do you call
We did. Oh my God!
My daughter told me you don't have to die to use an estate auction service.
Right. That's right. Well, and by the way,
pretend you're dead, and they come in.
That's smart on one level, but it's actually smart on another level, because one of the big problems we make as people is dying and leaving our kids with all the crap. It's so much better to get rid of that. I've told my parents this many times. I said, listen, if you don't specify what's important and what isn't, when you die, we're going to put this truck in the house. We're going to shake it till everything comes out of it, and we're going to throw it all away.
Yeah.
You know,
I was
don't
thinking
know
about
what's
that in the
important.
middle of the night last night. It's funny that you should say that. I have the Oxford English Dictionary, right? I bought
Okay.
I bought the 30 volume. It's not the one with the magnifying glass. It's the full. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Wow.
It's on my shelf.
Sure.
I very rarely, like once every 5 years, consult it. It's nice to have if you want to know the etymology.
And by the way, if the world goes south, it's kindling for a fire that might keep you safe and or warm.
I bought it in my 30s. I thought this is super cool to own this. I also have a World Book Encyclopedia. That's above it. There's no.
I'd also point out you have the internet. So.
Is the
I don't really
floor
need-
under this bookshelf buckled at this point?
Well,
does
it's
it
funny
even-
that you should say that because the shelf did collapse at one point.
Of course.
Because there's a lot of that's heavy.
You're like, hold on a second. That's a load-bearing encyclopedia. What are you doing?
But it breaks my heart to get rid of it because it's so wonderful.
Yeah, you got to get
But I
over
don't-
that. The
yeah, I don't
emotional
need
thing is,
It's also wonderful to have pictures of it too.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things in doing this great movie, she's consolidated the kids' stuff down to they each have a tote.
That's right.
That starts with birth certificate and ends with like university graduation.
Right.
But
Perfect.
that's
But it's
the
all
one, and everything
digital.
else
It's
was
perfect.
scanned.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
That's what Lisa does too. She says one folder with all of it.
Wait.
Just the a sampling of all of it.
This is a tote. It's full of paper, and but you can carry it. It's the right size.
My son
So-
has inexplicably, through no action on his own, gotten a series of promotions at the company he works for, and now has an office.
Yeah.
And it's become like a joke. Like it's like next week he'll be running the company. But anyway, his office, he doesn't have anything to put on the walls. And we said, no problem. We have a bunch of stuff we can send you can put on the walls. And it's just all his stuff, like childhood drawings.
And this I drew in third grade. Here's here's a plastic vase I made for my mom in fourth.
Well, your participation award in Little League, that everyone got. Like we have a lot of stuff.
So
Employee
his
of the week
coworkers are
at,
going to come in and say,
McDonald's.
"Is this stuff for your kids?" No, me.
No, it's mine.
I really think there should be a service where people come in and they just go through this stuff. You can hide your head. You can go away for a week, and then you come home and everything's simple, and you forgot that you had. The
Well,
Oxford
you can.
English
So
Dictionary.
this is very common.
Is this dehortification? Is that what this
Yeah.
is?
There's a very common bit of advice that basically says, put the crap in a box, put the box out of sight, let some amount of time. It could be a month, a year, 3 months, whatever. And then when you look at that thing again, you realize you didn't need a single thing in it. Just throw it away.
That's how that storage room works. Every box in that storage room had a date on it.
You're right. You guys were, that's right.
It's aging.
And as soon as the box was 3 years old and you didn't even know what was in it, it's like,
just get rid of it.
Same
You're
thing
done.
with clothes.
You're done.
Yeah, same thing with clothes. If you never wear it in 3 years. Even Marie Kondo, who's the queen of this, that was the whole.
That
rage.
hypocrite! I know exactly what you're going to say. I knew it. I saw that story. Like I knew it.
Yeah, she was the one you'd pick up a piece of clothing, and if it doesn't spark joy,
sure.
you ruthlessly get rid of it. And she would
Let
come
me
to
tell you
people's
something about a
houses.
single woman who grows up in a 300 square foot apartment in Tokyo. Yeah, no kidding. You don't have anything.
Yeah.
So
I
the
have
story
empathy for her because she had kids. Once you've had kids,
That's
all
right.
the rules change.
The story
That's
Paul
right.
and I saw was that she is now like completely surrounded by junk.
This was the biggest nonsense I'd ever seen in my life, and I'm like, when I saw, I was like, exactly. Now you have
Even
kids,
Marie-
and you know what
Welcome to
that does
mortality.
for me? That sparks joy because you are a hypocrite.
She says
You have no idea what you're talking
this
about.
she says, I've kind of given up on tidying.
Oh my God, seriously. Now that I'm a multi-millionaire,
Yeah. And I have
based
3
on
children.
nonsense advice,
Yeah.
just like every other
Yeah.
idiot self-help book writer.
She says,
Yeah.
my home is messy, but the way I'm spending my time is the right way for me at this stage of my life. That's what we were trying to tell you, Marie.
And you were like, no, throw the kid in the drawer. If you don't need it, throw it away. Stupid. It always bothered me, that whole thing. He's a fraud.
She's a fraud. She's a hoarder just like everyone else.
I love it.
I think she has been enlightened.
Next time we see her, she's going to be like 250 pounds. There's going to be garbage all over the floor, like kids running everywhere like feral animals.
I do, though. I do fantasize about having an almost monastic cell with just the things I need: a piece of paper, a pencil, a AMD Ryzen
Leo,
7 computer.
You've been alive. All right, but you've been alive long enough to know that this is how life really works, which is I go through, like, I'll just give you one example. I have a bin that has cables in it of all kinds. You separate the cables.
The famous
put them into little piles.
cable drawer.
You do the thing.
Yeah.
And then you're like, all right, this is what I need. I'm throwing everything else out. The next day, my wife goes, hey, you have a charging thing for my Kindle? And I'm like, I just threw it out. I literally just threw it out.
Don't worry, Amazon can get you a new one in a day.
No, I know, but that's exactly what happens. Like it's.
But that's the rationale for saving all that stuff is I might need it. But most of the time, let's face it.
You know what I gave up? I gave up the VGA cables, and let me tell you why.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell us why.
You ain't gonna need it.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, it's crazy.
Yeah.
What does this have to do with anything? Okay, so Microsoft 365
again with the rat holes. Again with the rat holes.
No, this was a related rat hole. It's
okay.
It's good.
Okay, lower storage. It was about storage. We were talking about storage.
Yeah. It was about storage.
Yes. So actually, semi-storage related. Microsoft announced this past week that they're going to include Clipchamp with its commercial versions of Microsoft 365. And that may be confusing at first because Clipchamp is a free app that's included with Windows 11. Why would they have to do this? And they actually didn't provide all the details I wanted, but if you were to pay for Clipchamp, which you can, whatever they call that subscription, you get three things, basically. Well, I'll call them two things. One is you get a bunch of assets, which could be graphics, special effects, text effect, whatever they are, that you don't get for free, right? So you pay for that. But you also get storage. And that's kind of an interesting thing because Microsoft owns OneDrive, obviously OneDrive for business on the business end, SharePoint, et cetera. Like why wouldn't it store this stuff in your OneDrive automatically? I feel like that's coming. So the business version of Clipchamp will use your business storage, right? So if you're a consumer and you're using Clipchamp on your computer, the files that make up your project, which are, the video that you're making, are on your hard drive somewhere. They could be synced to OneDrive, if that's how you do it, but they're just somewhere. So if you make a video, because I do this a lot, you publish it or export it, and then you move all those files, either delete them or just put them somewhere else, and you bring up Clipchamp again. Clipchamp can't find them, right? So you'll have a bunch of missing assets. With this system that they're having, at the very least, commercial customers will be able to, they'll have all their assets in OneDrive. So it will always work. It will be automatic. I looked, I don't see anywhere in there any language about the other kind of paid features of Clipchamp, this special effects and whatever else, the like stock videos and images and sounds and whatever they have. But so I don't know if that's part of it, but this is actually an improvement over the consumer version. And you could roll this yourself. You could, by always storing your assets in OneDrive, but I think that's kind of a cool feature because Clipchamp, you sign into your Microsoft account. In this case, you'll sign into your work and school account, but when your projects sync between your computers. So if all your stuff is on your desktop on one computer and you go to your other computer, it's not going to find anything because it's not there. So I think that's kind of an obvious feature. I when they bought Clipchamp, I didn't understand why they weren't just integrating this with OneDrive. And I think they will. I'm guessing they will based on this announcement. So we shall see.
It's a great product.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Clipchamp,
and I told you,
yeah.
So tomorrow I record Hands on Windows. I'm trying to figure out if it's 2 or 3 part, but it's going to be a multi-part series on Clipchamp on that podcast soon.
Which brings me to our glance of the week. No, that's not right. This is Threads. Mark Zuckerberg just what do you call it? Threaded?
Yeah.
A message with his wife Priscilla. He writes, "Hey Priscilla, did you see the octagon I put in the backyard?"
Oh, geez.
Yes, I saw it. It looks awesome. Mark,
this isn't real, is it?
Yeah, it's Zuck on Threads. We have plenty of yard space. Mark, I've been working on that grass for 2 years. Anyway, that was our thread of the week. No, I meant to say, I pushed the wrong button. I meant to say, because you were talking about Hands on Windows, that is a special show we do for members of the club. And if you're not a member of the club, I want to encourage you to join. We are now almost 8,000 strong. I'd love to cross that 8,000 number. We are a little more than 1%, though, of our total audience are members. And I feel like this should be more. If you are not a member, why would you want to join Club Twit? You get ad-free versions of all the shows, this show included. Means no trackers either, just completely privacy forward. You also get shows we don't put out anywhere else, like Hands on Windows with Paul Thurrott, Hands on Macintosh with Micah Sargent, the new AI show Jason Howell's developing, Home Theater Geek with Scott Wilkinson. We brought that back for the club. This Week in Space, launched in the club, if you will, is now out in the public. Club members really support what we're doing. Plus, the club has all sorts of events. Let me see what Ant's got planned. He's got some great events coming up. In fact, I think this week he's going to do a live photo critique on Friday, 4 p.m. Pacific. Your favorite photos. If you want to make them of coffee, you can, but they don't have to be. We're doing a photo walk at the end of the month. Stacy's Book Club at the end of the month. Daniel Suarez is going to do a fireside chat with Hugh Howey. I'll be joining that one September 7th. Aunt Pruitt, Lou Maresca, and Ask Me Anything. Our lead editor and our AI guru, Anthony Nielsen's doing a fireside chat too. Those are some of the events we do in the club. It's kind of become, I don't know, the kind of the Commonwealth Club of the internet. It's a great place to hear from interesting people. We also have stuff like the great conversation you guys were having before the show, which doesn't make it into the show, but will make it onto the Twit Plus feed in the club. Now, I just told you a whole bunch of benefits. What I didn't tell you is how affordable it is. $7 a month for all of that. That is, I think, a great deal. $84 a year. You also can do family plans. If you want to have multiple members of your family members, we can give you a discount for that. There's also corporate memberships. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit to learn more if you want to hear Hands on Windows. Let's see. I think we should talk about developers, as we continue with Windows Weekly.
Yeah. So anyone who follows .NET will be shocked to learn that .NET 8 will launch in November. Oh, wait, they do that every single year. But they're doing it again. So November 14th is the start of .NET Conf, which is a 3-day virtual conference, I guess, where they will announce, well, not so much announce, but release .NET 8 and all of the associated .NET 8 products, including .NET MAUI, the new version of .NET MAUI, I should say. This is actually, it's kind of weird, but this is one of my favorite shows. Like all the other Microsoft shows that are like this, they will be down, you can watch it live if you want, but all that stuff will be made available for download later as well, all the sessions and everything.
Is it Redmond? Where are they doing it?
Well, it's virtual, so yeah, it is in Redmond.
There's no actual
no one can go. Yeah, but the cool thing they're doing, they did this with Build, and I would probably with Ignite, although I can't remember for some reason. But they're actually going to have at least a 24-hour span where everything they do is live.
Oh, that's neat.
Over 24 hours. So no matter where you are in the world, you can interact with the people from Microsoft in real time.
Nice.
That's the usual thing for .NET Conf is that they have sort of a traditional virtual event, but then they do sort of a 24-hour community
neat
thing. And so MVPs and such can submit to be part of that, and it literally will bomb around the world talking about .NET and the new bits.
Yeah, get questions in real time from people who are on the other side of the planet or whatever. So,
and .NET 8 is the next long-term support version of .NET, .NET 6 being the last one. So looks to be a very important version, actually. It's the one that's going to persistent.
And that's just sort of what Rich and I were talking about before the show, is the awesome transparency of the .NET team. It seems, I don't know the exact cadence, but every month there's a new milestone on the way to the final release, and they all have new features and changes, and and the whole thing is created in tandem with the community. So there's a lot of back and forth. It's very interesting. It's not the Microsoft. It's not your father's Microsoft. It's kind of the new Microsoft. It's neat.
Yeah, it's a level of it's a sense of transparency, but it's not transparency.
It's not even transparency.
For transparency's sake.
It's collaboration. It's it's like, it's amazing. So yeah, I love this part of Microsoft. So it's neat. The exact opposite of what I get from Windows, basically. Clarity and transparency.
Xbox.
Okay.
Let's do some Xbox.
Yeah, let's do a lot of Xbox. So some big news again this week. I've been trying to shuffle around the Activision Blizzard stuff, so you don't ever know where it's coming, but this time it's just coming to the Xbox segment at the end. So we have known for some time now that obviously the CMA has gone back and forth. They've done this backtracking thing. It's like a Monty Python sketch. I don't know what's happening over there, but they made their final decision back in April, I think it was. Blew the world away when they denied this acquisition on the grounds of some future crime thing related to cloud gaming, which is a market that does not exist and probably will never exist. But whatever. So they've already obviously seen which way the wind's blowing. They're trying to step back from that cliff after having stepped off of it, which is interesting and fascinating and funny in many ways. But as part of this process, they asked Microsoft to submit a list of reasons why they should change their mind. Right. So the assumption was Microsoft would offer some concessions of some kind. And Microsoft did not do that. I am fascinated by this. What they did instead was say, hey, it's like they're trying to help them save face. When you made your decision, you didn't have all the facts. Because what happened since then was there was a several-day hearing with the Federal Trade Commission in front of a federal judge, and all this new evidence came out. And that evidence, if you had it, it would have changed your mind.
Right.
So here it is. And so, and some of this is actually, quite pertinent. But the thing is, the CMA erred in a way that the EU didn't, by not taking some steps that they should have to regulate rather than just deny. So, for example, when Microsoft went to the EU and said, hey, we want to buy Activision Blizzard, they were like, cool. What about this cloud gaming thing? And they're like, what about it? And they're like, well, we're afraid you're going to dominate this market if it ever exists. And they're like, all right, here's what we'll do. We'll set up partnerships with every cloud gaming service that's available in the EU, and they can get access to all of our, key games and everything. Well, it will be for 10 years. And the EU said, yep, that actually satisfies our concerns. And the CMA, instead, they went through the same thing, and the CMA said, we don't think that your agreements mean anything. What if you just go back on them? Like, what if you literally ignore the agreement you made? Which is like, what?
What?
So now Microsoft can say, hey, we have a legally binding agreement with the EU that covers all of the services you're concerned about. It has severe penalties for breach of contract. What they did was they regulated. They made it a legal requirement that we couldn't change our agreement with those companies without going to EU first and getting their approval. Right. So now there is, in fact, a legally enforceable element to the agreements they already had that wasn't in place, and the CMA did not ask for, because they, like I said, I think they kind of mailed this one in. But now it's there. They will protect UK companies and consumers. You don't even have to do anything. The EU will do it for you. So there's one. That's cool. The EU had the CMA, had concerns, which again, nonsense, that Microsoft would foreclose Call of Duty, preventing it to go to Sony or whatever, right? Since then, Sony appeared at the FTC hearing and said, you know what? We were never actually concerned about that. just crazy. We're funny like that. We were kidding. We never actually thought that. A lot of documentation came out. There was a famous quote from the circuit judge who said, you people have unearthed 1 million documents and whatever number of blah, 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 and all these experts, and you have not found a single piece of evidence that counters Microsoft's claim that they would never foreclose on Call of Duty. So that happened, also, and this is an inconvenient truth for these guys. Sony agreed to bring it to a 10-year call. We think it's a 10-year extended agreement with Call of Duty to keep it on PlayStation. So now Sony, that company you were worried about protecting, has a guarantee, legally enforceable, that they will never not have Call of Duty. So that one's just done. And then I promised market definition. This was the big one to me. So I actually, when in my write-up about this, I really went into this a lot. This is an example of antitrust regulators, in this case, the CMA, wanting to narrowly define a market to show that Microsoft could abuse it. Because the bigger Microsoft is, the more chances they could abuse the market. Microsoft is saying, the video game market's really big, and we are a minority player in consoles, and we have no presence in mobile gaming at all. We have no presence in casual gaming. We're a player in the PC space, but we're not in any way dominant, blah, 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 whatever. So how do you prove that the market that the CMA believes exists, which is cloud gaming, does not exist? Easy. You talk to people that have cloud gaming services, or did, like Google. They got the guy that ran Stadia to come up and admit that Stadia did not exist to compete with cloud gaming services. It was to compete with PCs, with consoles, with mobile. That was the point of it. And they're like, oh, so I guess that's the market then. It's the whole thing. It's not what the CMA said it was. NVIDIA, same thing. Even Sony said it was the same thing. Sony, that guy, the guy who runs PlayStation America, what's his name? Ryan something. Where is this? Whatever that guy's name. Oh, it's later in the article. That's why. He invented the Microsoft might take Call of Duty off of PlayStation thing, even when he knew it wasn't true. Said, yeah, cloud gaming's nothing. It's not its own market. And where is this guy? I got Jim Ryan. I'm sorry. Yeah, outspoken critic, right? He said there's no way to determine if cloud gaming would ever be a standalone offering. Cloud gaming to Microsoft is not a standalone offering. The one big one that existed, Stadia, folded because it didn't make sense. Right. It's just not a relevant market. Also, documents that came out as evidence in the FTC hearing proved that Microsoft loses money on cloud streaming because the infrastructure is so expensive. In fact, there was a story that just came up in the last 24 hours, which I don't have in the notes, where people trying to get on cloud gaming can't because there are too many people using it. Now, there aren't a lot of people using it. So Brad and I were speculating that the real reason is they need that infrastructure for AI, which is the future of the business, not cloud gaming.
Well, it's how they're betting right now anyway.
But then I'm sorry, this is one more point that's just I just think it's funny. So their final bit of evidence or new evidence is this is just a legalese aimed at the CMA, because the reason the CMA can reverse its so-called final decision is a little bit of legal maneuvering, and it has to do with this notion that if things change materially after they make a decision, you can come back.
Sure, and so they offered him new information.
Yeah, but the fourth one is not new information. Well, I guess it's new information, but because the FTC and the CMA dragged their feet so long on this, they had 18 months to figure this stuff out, but they dragged on purpose. And there was this feeling that since April, when the CMA said no, that the two agencies were working in lockstep to draw this out so that the July 18th date would happen, and they would just have to be like, I guess we're done.
Yeah.
But the thing is, this is like apparently under the terms set by the CMA, because the two companies had to extend the final date. In effect, according to EU rules, CMA rules, they this is a new agreement. It's a new acquisition.
Oh, wow.
It's the thing that they said no to no longer exists. This is a new acquisition. So you actually have to think about it again. And that's according to their own rules. This one I find to be kind of funny. So it's it just says a final order which has the effect of prohibiting or qualifying the completion of the acquisition would be plainly unjustified. In other words, you ruled on something that no longer exists. That doesn't have any basis on this new thing, because now they've extended it to, I think, it might just be the end of August or whatever.
I thought it was October.
It could be. I actually, I was thinking the same thing. I think end of August is the CMA deadline. So they have they didn't offer anything new. They just said, you're wrong here because of this. You're wrong here because of this. You're wrong here because of this. And your own rules say that this is not true. So you're wrong there too. And I God bless them. You get the feeling, I really expected like something like here's a bone, Yeah. And instead what they did was say, we're getting tired of this.
But they're following the rules to the letter.
Yeah.
Saying you're allowed to revisit this because there's new information. Here is the new information. Oh, and because we've now extended this deal, you need to review the deal. These are your rules. We're following your rules.
I just love that. Supposedly so information documentation, words were said, did occur during the FTC hearing. That did happen. But why wouldn't the CMA have talked to the guy that ran Sony? Why wouldn't the CMA talk to
this was their job.
The other thing that's funny about this is there's supposed to be a time where the public gets to respond to an acquisition like this before they issue a ruling. They did this last year, and they were told overwhelmingly by the consumers who live in the UK, by Microsoft's competitors, both in the cloud gaming space. Sony's customers who own PlayStations all said, yeah, we don't care. We don't care if they acquire this company. It's not going to affect us in the slightest. And now they have to do it again. They've already heard this, But now they're like, okay, we're open to feedback again. But this time you have 4 days. They're like, we are literally fast tracking this.
Wow.
During the time in which you're giving you the time to feedback or to write feedback, we're going to write the approval for this thing. And we're probably going to publish it on Friday or Monday or whenever they do it. Crazy. So this is it's crazy. It's crazy. All right. I'm going to blow through the rest of this because seriously. So it's August, or most of this, I should say. Games with Gold, as we know, is going away. So Microsoft issued the last Games with Gold yesterday, I guess. And, 2 games. We've been down to 2 games. Just like it's been for the past year or more. 2 games I've never heard of. Blue Fire
This is why it's going away. What games?
Well, Microsoft can't. There are no more games to offer, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Publishers have to buy into this. Everyone who has agreed has agreed. It's, they ran out of games. So these are the last 2 games. They were nice enough not to spread them out over the month. They're like, you can just have them, the whole month they're free. Just take them. So, okay, good. That's the right way to handle it.
That's good.
Beginning of the month. Did I screw up the listing? I did. No, I didn't. Okay. So, Games with Gold, same thing. Now this runs across PC, Xbox, and also cloud gaming. The first set of new games. This time I will say there is a familiar and excellent title in there. It's called Limbo. If you haven't played it, strongly recommended. It's kind of a 2D side scroller, creepy, excellent. The end.
I remember this. Yeah.
The end is very, very hard. The other games I've not heard of. I'm a little nervous about the game called Broforce Forever. I think those are the guys I see in Roma Norte from Australia.
Broforce, bro.
The really loud guys wearing sandals that don't speak Spanish. Sad. But there's a bunch of other games. Everspace 2, whatever. Okay. Final Fantasy 14, excuse me, is finally coming to Xbox.
That's kind of amazing.
This is notable because this game came out in 2010, and I want you to think about that for a second because I did say 2010. That was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And the story is the Xbox organization at the time, not the one we have today. In fact, the Xbox 360 was the current concern back then. That's how long ago this is. They wanted to do something. Square Enix, the makers of Final Fantasy, wanted to do something a little different with the way the server platform works for the online games. And Microsoft said, no, this is a closed ecosystem. You use Xbox Live. That's the whole thing. And they would not allow it.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we're not doing it. And so 13 years went by. Well, there's a new Xbox team in town run by Phil Spencer. And he's a good friend of the guy. He's not the guy that runs Square Enix. He's the guy that is in charge of this game. I guess the inventor of the game. And he appeared on stage last week with this man at the Final Fantasy 14 Fan Fest 2023 in Las Vegas, which, by the way, was packed to the gills. This is one of the most popular games in the world.
Yeah.
And it is coming to Xbox Series S and X start in early
So they make the concession? They provided the different...
No one said, but that's the assumption that these guys are like, yeah, you do it. It's more, why would we just want the game on our platform? Like, duh, like, you know, so
stop. Because they're at Final Fantasy 16, and arguably that's the last Final Fantasy.
Yeah, right.
So the real question is, when does that show up for Xbox? Maybe 2033?
Well, I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen, right? I mean, we'll see. So they didn't talk about that. But for now, we're doing this one. There'll be a public beta very soon, meaning probably this month,
14.
by the way. So, yeah, for 14. Did I say 16? Sorry.
No, I said 16.
You
said 14. Okay. But 14, by the way, is a phenomenal game. Like truly,
I've never even looked at it, but it looks amazing. I mean,
it's a great game. I mean,
so it's one of those kind of
particular style, but
yeah, it's like an MMO kind of our what do you call it, role playing game, and it has existed online for like 30 years. It's incredible. I think that's amazing.
It's
incredible. I wish Call of Duty was like that. And then Microsoft used to have a thing called Mixer. I'm sorry if that caused like a little twitch in anybody. Pardon the pun.
Isn't that the one they paid Ninja $10 million to
a lot?
Yeah,
a lot.
That was a stupid waste of money.
Well, I think Ninja's laughing all the way to the bank.
Oh,
yes, he did just fine.
He just did another deal with Kick. He's good to be an influencer. That's all I could say.
Sure.
As soon as Drake plays Fortnite with you, you get to do what you want. Right?
Yep.
So Microsoft, in the wake of the Mixer debacle, partnered with Discord, and now they are adding a new feature, which is a big one, which is game streaming to Discord, which to me seems like most of the point of integration. But anyway, they're going to start allowing PC. No, that's not true. Xbox console users to stream games to a Discord server.
Nice.
Yeah, cool. So that's nice for you Discord fans, and there are Discord fans watching this show, listening to the show, watching the show.
They're in Discord, even.
Yep, literally in Discord. Yep. That was my contorted way of saying that. Sorry. English works well too. So as part of the serviceability thing that's occurring across our industry, Microsoft is now allowing people to buy official repair parts for Xbox controllers. That's good for me because every controller I own gets broken in some way. It's like the thumbsticks are stuck in one position. It's like I drop it on the floor and it's kind of all whatever.
From hurling it at the screen.
It's usually dropping. I'm more clumsy than I am angry. I like walking to walls sometimes, that don't move, and I don't know. So the repair parts for the Xbox Elite Series 2 controllers are what we have at the start. $19.99 to $59.99 depending on the parts. They're only available to from Microsoft, I should say, directly. I expect that to change over time. And I think we're going to also see this. The series, the Elite Series controllers make sense for repairability because they actually have parts that come off and everything. Right. So I don't know how they would exactly.
Interchangeable.
Yeah. So maybe over time, as part of this repairability thing, in the same way that we'll be able to probably take the battery out of a smartphone and replace it ourselves. Hopefully they'll be able to do this over time with controllers as well. We'll see. And interesting timing, given all this Activision Blizzard stuff and the talk of which company is dominant, which is not. Sony announced as part of their earnings report last week that they have now sold over 40 million PlayStation 5 units, which is an incredible number.
How many Xbox have been sold?
17 or 18.
Oh, so it's a lot more.
Yeah, it's not even half.
Yeah, something like that. We don't know for sure, but it's nowhere close. The other thing that's happening is, Microsoft console sales have actually gone down in recent, I'll call it months, several months, whereas the PlayStation is kind of picking up speed. These things came out at the same time, and so they're literally directly comparable, neck and neck, and Sony's just running away with this one. And this is what happened with the PS4, Xbox One generation as well. Although I feel like the gap between, Microsoft did a nice thing by releasing new versions of Xbox One over time, right? There was the S and the X, and I thought that was kind of interesting. They're going much slower this console generation with that kind of, reduced cost, whatever, additional functionality, like Pro version or whatever. Both of them are, but Sony seems to be pulling ahead pretty dramatically right now, and it will be interesting to see if this triggers any mid-season, upgrade or whatever you want to call it next year. Maybe, I guess we'll see. I should do the Switch. I moved this around to the wrong location, but there's rumors now that the Switch will have a replacement next year, which sounds great. They've talked vaguely about allowing people on the Switch to kind of move forward. I hope that means literal compatibility with games. We'll see, but it sounds like it's
the way Nintendo normally does things.
Yeah, I know, but I these guys have sold 100 million units. I think they want to ride that wave.
I mean, I would argue the only real problem here is if you do split the units, then you're splitting your dev teams. Both products will move slower. You're not going to ignore the old Switch players. So.
Well, except maybe they are. I think the deal with with the Switch is 6 years old.
Yeah.
There's been some interim other versions of the light version, the OLED version. There was never the 4K version. I mean, you could probably, if this is a Switch successor, you could kind of look at 4K. It. Yeah, like 4K Switch. Yeah, I'm guessing. And by the way, I will say this: I bet it runs Call of Duty. So whatever you think it might be,
I mean, the logical thing is it will run the old games so that they at least can emulate the old games in it.
That's right. Yeah, Nintendo has this online service where you can download emulated games from them, right, and run a classic version of Mario or something, and that's okay. But these things kind of being right on top of each other, it may be a situation where it's a literal a Switch 2 or something. We'll see. I cover a lot of quarterly earnings. I don't typically, or maybe even ever, write about electronics arts earnings, but now that they're going to be the last man standing in this market after Activision Blizzard goes away as a standalone entity, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of look at them, and they're doing great. This is quarterly revenue is $1.9 billion, a gain of 9% year over year, record earnings. Huge franchises doing amazingly well. All the sports games, Madden, NFL, EA Sports, FC.
That's all of their original moneymakers. That and racing games. And
then stuff that, and of course the legacy. I just, Battlefield, Dead Space, Mass Effect, Need for Speed, The Sims. It's big. Their net bookings, which they describe as the number of products and services sold digitally or physically, up 21%. Live services was responsible for 75% of those revenues, 1.17 billion, up 4%. FIFA record revenues for the fiscal quarter. It's Star Wars Jedi Survivor's huge. So this is kind of the other Activision Blizzard, the same kind of thing. They've merged or purchased a lot of other companies, et cetera.
They also had major layoffs last quarter too, right? How much of this is really they've been tightening belts rather than they've been making great stuff, because it's the same freaking titles, man.
I was going to say, we could make the argument for Microsoft. And
this is what I'm saying, right? This is the old, I'm loath to be excited about their earnings when I don't see anything new coming out, just that they've cut.
So as a former Call of Duty addict, I can say, I'm not interested personally in sports games, but those are the ultimate example of something that comes out every year, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at games like FIFA, NFL, NBA Live, NHL, PGA, and even, well, maybe not UFC, but I see this. I understand the appeal, I guess is what I'll say. Those aren't my type of games personally, but I understand why people probably go back and buy one every single year. They're just into that sport. It's their thing. That's what they do. So it's a good model. You get people to buy the same thing every single year. It's not
it's worked for them, and they've been able to keep those deals for a reason. They've been trying to make hit MMOs since they bought Ultima Online back in the day, right?
Yeah.
It's just they've never had a big winner.
They also, it's funny, they own Medal of Honor, and Medal of Honor is the franchise that actually spewed out Call of Duty. That's where it came from. If you want to go back and play the original Medal of Honor, the World War II game, and the couple of expansion packs they had for it, that was the team that went on to make the first Call of Duty game.
Yeah.
There have been some really good Medal of Honor entries since then, but not in a while. And then Battlefield, of course, is the sort of also as not emerged, but as things have evolved, it's also seen as a Call of Duty competitor. Although I don't really think they're on the same playing field, if you will.
No.
They're different. Battlefield was always bigger maps, more stealth and strategy. Call of Duty was more like yelling into a room with an axe and just killing everything.
Yeah.
Same settings, but different approach. And then finally, Microsoft is killing the Xbox console app this month, which is a little scary. So I think this thing actually debuted with Windows 8, not Windows 10, but it's been around a while. It's a UWP app, which whatever.
The console companion.
Yeah, the console companion app.
Yeah.
The rationale is that Microsoft has something called the Xbox app, and that we don't need the Xbox console app anymore because we have this other thing. And to which I reply, that's not true. So the console app, which you have to download from the store now, it's no longer included with Windows, is actually very important. If you play games on an Xbox console and you create screenshots or record videos, and then you want to go to your PC and edit them and share them somehow. This is how you did it. You could get your access to your library of recordings. You could check the ones you wanted to download. You could watch them in the app, but the point to me was you could download them and then share them from there. The Xbox app does not do that. So I don't believe there is a way from a PC. I don't think you can go to the web or go to OneDrive.com. I've looked. I haven't found it. So if you know differently, let me know. I know you will. But I believe the only way to do this now is from the Xbox, share it to OneDrive. And then you can access it from a computer. So to me, this is a little bit of a loss. It's not like I liked the app, but for those instances where I wanted some footage, and actually I wanted to use it this past week for an Activision Blizzard story, I wanted to grab an old shot I had taken of Call of Duty.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I haven't turned on my Xbox. And I was in Mexico. I didn't have it. So I'm like, I don't even know.
You haven't plugged in your Xbox yet. You must be at 5 months now.
Yeah. Are you? Yeah. How's that going? You really, you cold
fine.
turkey, huh?
Yeah, I well, I've been playing on the PC a little bit, so I didn't play it all when I was away, and I've only been home a day or 2 days. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna finish. I've been playing like older games. I've been playing Doom 3, for example. I'm gonna finish that soon.
Yeah, I don't understand the nostalgia thing.
You're not giving up gaming. You're just giving up.
It's what I hope is a healthier relationship with gaming.
A healthier relationship. I like that.
It's less gaming and less of exactly the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm doing that with Valheim. I'm kind of reliving Valheim, which is probably not a healthy.
I just read that John Romero book, and I got to tell you, I'm probably going to play Doom and Doom 2 again, and I'm probably going to play Quake again.
I loaded Doom on my Switch for that after reading that book.
Love those games. And that book is so great. I talked about that last week, but so many details that were just unknown before. You sort of thought maybe Master Doom is the definitive history of this thing, and it's like, actually, this is it. He was there, and he has.
Yeah, I haven't read this. I've read Masters of Doom, so you saying I should read it.
Definitely read it. Yeah. Yep. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The only thing in it, by the way, so I'll eventually write this. I wrote this in a review that I haven't published it yet, but very transparent, very open about all of the mistakes he's made and how these things have kind of helped him grow as a person, et cetera. What's not in the book? It's very strange. A very big thing, actually. Stevie Case.
He left
Case
Stevie out?
He mentioned Stevie twice
in passing.
In the same paragraph. So for people who don't know, this was Kill Creek. She was a like what we now would call an e-sport kind of player. She played Quake and Doom and all that stuff. And she was fantastic. She was an early example of like a woman who did this stuff. She did for the Microsoft guys, she eventually hooked up with John Romero. They lived together for 4 years. You'd think that would have warranted some discussion in this book. It's not a biography, but she also underwent a kind of a personal transformation, kind of like Jay Allard. If you're familiar with him, he was like this little balding, fat geek loser, and he turned himself into like a hipster,
Did he get implants
awesome.
Too?
No, he didn't do that.
Okay.
But so Kill Creek, or Stevie Case, was in Playboy, and she was a rock star in that world. And there's one paragraph in the book where it literally says, we started Ion Storm, and my job was this, Tom Hall's job was this, and Stevie Case was our whatever. And then we went to Monkey Stone Games, I think it was called, and Stevie was a developer there. And I was like, wow. She was a little bigger than that.
She's a big part of Masters of Doom. That's really interesting, huh?
She was a big part of the whole thing, right? Yeah. I mean, she was famous,
maybe
really famous,
maybe he didn't want to, cause problems with his current wife. Or
yes,
heck, she may have even asked to be left out too. You never know.
Might have.
Yeah, we don't
true.
know. Yeah, it's but notable for her absence because she really was a big part of the story.
Yeah.
He beat her one time in a famous kind of death match thing, but then she beat him the second time, and that was a big thing. It was big news. Like a woman has beaten the guy who created the game.
Who was was really good.
It was big news.
Yeah,
it was big news. So anyway, there's
wild.
Yeah. Well, good. Congratulations on your withdrawal from.
It's okay. It's the least of my achievements this year, but thank you.
Very glad.
The only thing I've been playing was Dredge, and I got to the point where not only did I get all of the achievements, I've now challenged myself to complete in the least amount of time. Like, sure, that's where I'm at with that stupid game. Now I have to stop. Like that's that. Yeah. He did all the achievements.
Now it just gets
race
unhealthy.
To finish in a quarter time. There's nothing but illness from here.
That's right. Well, grab Limbo at the Game Pass. It's good.
Yeah, maybe I will. I know I've played it before. I'll light it up. Okay,
it's hard. The end is tough. You probably have to look up how to do it.
And to be clear, I'll be playing it in the PC Master Race as per usual.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
That's fine. That's not doing it any other way.
That's fine. I'm not biased that much.
Guess what's coming up next? It's the back of the book. Tips, tricks, brown liquor, all ahead as we continue with Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell. Let's kick off the back of the book. Paul Thurrott, you got a tip for us?
Yeah, so we talked earlier about Windows Copilot and some other 23H2 features making their way into the beta channel. Leo, as I say this, it's important to me that you not start doing this on your computer. But
I will
say if you are interested in testing
Windows
11 23H2 right now,
yes,
the way to do that would be to enroll in the Windows Insider program and sign up for the beta channel. Click that box so you can get out as soon as it goes live, right? You don't want to be in it forever. But you will get these things. There'll probably be builds every week now. You can check out all the new features ahead of time. And my expectation, I'm just kind of guessing, but well, not guessing, it's based on the past, is probably in September, there will be a preview update version of this that goes out to stable. And then in October, my guess is that we will see the final release. But this is one that should go out pretty quick, honestly. It's not like past releases where they kind of randomly roll it out and see how it goes, and it takes a long time. It's an enablement package. If you qualify for 22H2, you should just get it. That's the running theory. But if you want it early, beta channel is the way to go.
All right.
Right.
I'm not doing it.
Click the box.
You might think I'm doing it.
You don't do it. Everyone else, though.
I'm not doing it.
There is no announcement, but Microsoft Loop for Windows is now available in the Microsoft Store, which is kind of interesting. So when this thing went out in preview, there was a web app and there was there were mobile apps. I know I think it's on Android and iOS. I do use it on Android. Spoiler alert, in keeping with what we see with Clipchamp and Teams probably or whatever, but it's a web app. This is the web app. So it's a packaged version of the web app. So it's no different. In fact, it's curiously not as sophisticated as a lot of Microsoft web apps. If you right click on it, you'll get kind of a web menu and stuff. It's not, they didn't announce it. So I think maybe they're just kind of early testing it, but a lot of people were looking for like the app version. This is it and will be it as we move forward. But, this will probably be the way that, most people acquire it, whether they know it or not, right? You're not going to go to a URL in your web browser, although you can. You'll get the app, and it will probably come with the browser suite and all that stuff. The Office suite, but it's there now if you want it early. So it works. It works okay. It's just no better than the web app.
Yeah. How do you describe Loop to people?
Notion with an incredible infrastructure behind it. It's like Notion, but running on SharePoint, maybe.
Yeah, no, and that's
a highly managed version of Notion.
Do you want to move to Loop now from Notion?
Not now. I expected before now to have done this. I do think that us moving to Loop will make sense because it's the Microsoft thing and it integrates with OneDrive and all that stuff. And there are some limits with Notion with regards to sharing, and also just with the way you can apply styles and things that are actually much better in Loop. But my God, are these things? When you hear Slack complain about Teams and you look at the products, you're like, these don't look anything alike. I've never heard Notion complain about Loop. They should, because my God,
exactly the same.
It's a photocopy. It is identical from a UX perspective, the look and feel or whatever.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
People may not know. We use Notion. Paul uses it and Richard uses it to prepare the show, and that's our show rundown. And it's worked great.
Yep.
For years with Mary Jo, we were using OneNote. Loop has been Notion has been a much.
OneNote was a disaster, and Notion's been great.
Yeah,
we've had one glitch. I think it was right around the time Richard joined. It was a while ago. It's been one problem.
It was a permissions thing. It's not, these things.
Yeah, they figured it out. I complained, and they said, it's not just you, everyone.
There was a moment where you don't know. Yeah, you're right. You actually called tech support and they did the right thing.
Yeah, and they actually got back to, they were good about it. But so why would you switch to Loop other than the things I just said? Like, so one of the advantages of Clipchamp that I mentioned was, the nice thing about this is it's in the box. Like, I just have Windows and I have my editor. Right. It's beautiful. I don't have to install an app. My expectation is that the Loop app will come with Office, which I always install on my computers, or often it's just there to begin with. And it's not the reason, but it's one of the reasons. Like, one less thing to manage and install separately and make sure it's on every computer. Like, it's nice. It's just there. And it's not that's not the reason. Like, Notion is a good enough thing. Obviously, I don't mind. Although I got to say, you guys use Notion, right? So how many times have you gone to run Notion? You click on the icon, nothing happens. You wait, you click again. And then it comes up. It's like installing Notion. And then the way I sign in is I have to get a code through email and I have to paste the code into things. It's like, why does this happen all the time? Like, it seems like it's always updating. So there are some little things. I'm not saying it's like OneNote bad, but there are a couple of things where I'm like, something a little more sophisticated would be nice.
I'll tell you this, from an Office 365 perspective, activating Loop.
Yeah.
You had to set a group policies. Like, it was not simple to get Loop turned on.
I still don't have the new version of Teams for this exact reason. Yep. That stuff is too hard. So when that comes to, Loop is available to anyone can use Loop, right? So it's out there for a Microsoft account. But the new Teams, like, I'd like to be on that thing. Obviously, I still can't, I never figured it out. It's hard.
Yeah, and it's just like you only bang your head against the keyboard for so long before you're like, I got other stuff.
I think it's hard. So because Microsoft can pop something up and go, hey, do you want us to just manage this for you? What do you think, buddy?
Because you do that all the time with stuff I already have. Yep. So why don't you do it with the stuff?
Just like the one you just do it.
Yeah.
It's just, anyway, I'm sorry. It's a tangent, but Yep.
Mr. Richard Campbell.
Yes, sir.
It is now your turn to talk about Run As Radio.
This week's show, I talked to Julia Andriacola, who is part of the Fast Track group. So these used to be the premier field engineers, the folks who are actually out in the field doing the stuff. So I've had a recurring conversation over the past few months about the fact that all of these sysadmins, all of our organizations are going to have to move to Windows 11 sooner or later, and so you should really start prepping now. So it's fun to talk to the Johan Arwood marks on the outside, look at the suite of tools. But this is an insider. This is someone who's helping big organizations migrate to 11. And so having Julie walk us through using Windows Update for Business for this was really powerful, because this is the model of a big company doing it, where if you set up Windows Update for Business properly with the deployment services, literally the user is going to be told, hey, you're going to be upgraded to Windows 11. The deadline is like this Friday, but you can pick a time. You want to do it tonight, you want to do it tomorrow. So it does, you have some semblance of control. Big part that she was focused on was the ADMX part, the group policy stuff. As of ADMX 3, they're pretty much 11 and 10 are in sync now. So all of that stuff's been fixed. So it was good to sort of hammer through, okay, that policy stuff's done. Application privileges are the same. You remember that under the hood, Windows 11 is actually Windows 10.1. So it doesn't break things. It's just a solid conversation from someone who's been there migrating tens of thousands of seats to 11 on this is how you do it at scale.
Mike. Run As Radio, runasradio.com.
Yes, sir.
Let's see. I think we're coming to the end of the show, which means it's Bourbon O'Clock. What do you got?
It is Bourbon O'Clock.
What do you got for
us?
Well,
and I'm not sharing a bourbon with you today, actually, because I'm sharing Angel's Envy.
That's not a bourbon?
No, it's a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, which is not a bourbon.
Oh, thanks for the clarification.
Let's tell
that story.
You fool.
Commoner.
It's just so much fun to play with these names like this. But we really should start at the beginning. And if we're going to start at the beginning, we have to start with Lincoln Henderson. So Lincoln Henderson, born in 1938.
This would be better if you did it in a Paul Harvey voice.
There you go.
It all began with Lincoln Henderson in 1938. What was he?
He's a master distiller. He spent 40 years working for Brown Forman. Now, Brown Forman is actually a conglomerate that was built around originally Old Forester, a classic bourbon.
Yes.
Started by George Garvin Brown
in brown bags everywhere.
Yes. Who then he's the Brown in Brown Forman. One of the only 6 distilleries in the U.S. that was allowed to operate through prohibition to make medicinal whiskey.
I didn't know.
One of these days I'll have to just do a whole prohibition story because it's great. But
wow.
The Old Forester was one of the ones that was able to carry through that. And over time, as the Brown Forman group expanded, they bought various whiskeys. Some you may have heard of, like Jack Daniels. They have owned Jack Daniels since 1956. They actually bought Woodford Reserve twice. That's a whole other story. We'll do that later. So the last time they bought it was 1993. And just recently, only in 2017, they launched a specialty version whiskey called Cooper's Craft. They also bought the Benriach distillery, which includes the brands Glendronach and Glenglassaugh. And they, in 2015, lit up an Irish whiskey called Slane. What's this got to do with Lincoln Henderson? So Lincoln Henderson worked 40 years at Brown Forman, and he was the person who created Gentleman Jack, the first new version of Jack Daniels since the number 7 from 1870. So originally released in 1988 to much acclaim that he made this lighter version of Jack Daniels. In 96, after Brown-Forman had bought Woodford Reserve, he spent 3 years on it, making the new version of what we now know as Woodford Reserve. So that was also part of his legacy. And he did Jack single barrel and finally retired in 2003. So let's jump to his son, Wes Henderson. So Wes Henderson spent his whole life in distilleries, right? His dad was always there, and his dad was a legend. He invented these other whiskeys. He helped other distilleries get off the ground. So he kind of didn't want to be in the distillery business. He actually entered aerospace for a while and stuff, and then he invariably got pulled back in. He worked more in the consulting level until finally, in about 2003. He ended up in a situation with a distillery called Canary, which is actually based in Alabama, that had been selling whiskey illegally, and their CEO got busted and so forth. And he ended up being on the cleanup team and sort of got him on the straight and narrow and ran a distillery himself for the first time and liked it enough that he went to his retired father in 2006 and said, we should make a Henderson whiskey. We should do it ourselves. I want to make bourbon, but I want to make bourbon a little different because he loved Scottish whiskey. And so this whole we only age in American oak bugged him. He wanted to do finishing, finish in other styles of barrels, different flavors, that kind of thing. And that's really what Angel's Envy is. Angel's Envy is made in the bourbon process, except that it spends its last year in ruby port barrels. And that's just heresy. You should be burned at the stake. But Lincoln Henderson was involved, and Lincoln Henderson is a god. And so everybody had to pay attention. And so in 2011, they launched Angel's Envy. And coincidentally, I was doing shows in Louisville, Kentucky when this was going on, and got to actually see and meet Lincoln Henderson and see him present and talk about Angel Envy and the heresy that was all about that. And they did so well. They never marketed it at all, but just the gravity of the name and a very good tasting drink that by 2013, they built out a major distillery themselves in Louisville. So normally bourbon distilleries are out in the countryside because they were all wrapped around farms originally. But no, he built it right in the city. And Lincoln was able to be there as it opened and passed away the same year at 75 years old. He was the inaugural inductee to the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame. And he's the one who named it. Arguably, this may be apocryphal, but apparently Lincoln said when they were making this particular whiskey, he says, if the Angel's share is what's evaporating, it's the Angel's Envy that's in this barrel.
Nice.
So I get it. I like that.
It's nice, huh?
Yeah.
And so it's not. It can't be called bourbon because it violates the rules of bourbon by being finished in port barrels, which is where we get this term Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. Which I mean, literally. If you look at the original bottles on it, it just didn't say bourbon anywhere because they didn't want to break any rules. But eventually, folks came around to this idea that there's more than one way to make a whiskey, and so we're going to come up with other names. And there you'll see a lot of variations on the Kentucky straight. There'll be a Kentucky straight corn whiskey, which is like an 80% corn and so forth. But now, if you look on the bottle, it'll say Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey because it does not follow the bourbon rules, but it is delicious.
It's better. I think I like the port.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
They have a sherry finish.
Yep. Now they're doing everything. There's a Sauterne finish. They've got a high rye. Like they're but the big thing is that Wes Henderson's moved on. He's now in the Hall of Fame too, by the way. But he went off. He did a thing with Metallica of all flipping things, making this thing called Blackened. But and is close to his own retirement. So it's run by a larger organization, and they've been doing lots of variations on this finishing concept.
The port finish, that was the first?
That's Ruby Port was their original product. It's my preferred product. I've tried many of them.
That's probably similar to sherry. I really like
sweeter,
sherry
maybe,
finish.
right? Sherry's drier.
It just cuts the kind of sharpness of it, right?
Yeah.
Well. And they use Ruby Port, which tends towards the more fruity side as opposed to a tawny port, which is more of your like caramel nut notes. So either way, these are just a bit of a fishing flavor. Somebody's asking about the Devil's Cut. That's Jim Beam. And it's a funny story. The devil's cut being what you get out of the barrel after you've drained it is what they call devil's cut.
Oh, I see they have a cask strength Angel's Envy. That might be cool.
Always do. Yeah. And that's the same thing. Like you start with your original product and then they just started to expand the line because people like experimentation now. They really do.
Ice cider finish. That's hysterical for you funny, Canadians. Yeah.
Well,
it's not finished till it's finished.
Yeah. In the original incarnation, they weren't trying to do a lot of flavor matching. So literally they were putting batch numbers on the bottles. And so, batch to batch, they were different. That's settled down. I think that was a problem. I had one of the original bottles. I don't have it anymore. That the cork was stamped with 1010 because it was supposed to be released in October 2010.
Wow.
And Lincoln Henderson didn't like what they had made at that point. So they held it and didn't release it till mid 2011, but they'd already bought the corks. So if you got original batch, they had 1010 on the cork.
Yeah. Huh. This is really, I've always liked Angel's Envy, and I guess I know why.
I don't know that I've ever heard of this.
And again, it's like not promoted at all. They didn't try.
I only know about it because Richard told us about it when he was in studio at the Brick House ages
back in the day.
Back in the day, yeah.
Okay. I don't remember.
And then so because we had the chance, Carl and I got to meet Lincoln Henderson and be enamored of what they were doing.
Wow, that's cool.
But they were also smart. Like they were breaking the rules, and so how did they tackled it in a way that you couldn't resist them?
Yeah.
Like rolling out the old man, the guy who had lit the bourbon industry up and loved what he was making, was super excited. The Henderson family brand, like everything about that was great. It was powerful. And it was just an interesting exercise in really helping an industry, I'd argue, modernize, like that in some ways American bourbon was trapped. And when one of their godfathers says we should do more, you couldn't ignore them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. All right. I might have to go to Louisville and visit the factory on Main.
Fantastic tour. Absolutely worth it. Oh yeah. And I wasn't there that first day, but apparently they were milling their own corn and they loaded the machining correctly and blew 1.5 foot of corn across the whole room.
That might be fun.
Buried the room in corn. Like all of the mistakes.
Oh, that might be fun. Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, it's an experience, and it's cool that it's in Louisville. Like if you don't, these guys are not the rebels of the bourbon industry. They love the bourbon industry. They cared a lot for it and they wanted to do more with it. And so all of these moves were important. We're a part of a demonstration of a loyalty to the American whiskey making business, and just they could open it up. I mean, I'm putting a lot of onus on a bottle of whiskey that just plain old tastes good. Right?
It's a good whiskey. It's very smooth.
But I love this story. I love the story of an industry icon saying, "Let's go further."
Richard Campbell rapidly becoming an industry icon in his own right.
I don't know that's
Run His Radio and .NET Rocks. All at runhasradio.com. Great to have you from Coquitlam. Paul Thurrott's back home in Macungie. He is, of course, at Thurrott.com. Even if he's in Mexico, he's at Thurrott.com. And his books, Windows Everywhere, the newest, and the Field Guide to Windows 11 are available at leanpub.com. You set your own price, but they are always worth it. Always worth it.
Thank you.
And every Wednesday we get together and we talk about Microsoft right here. You can watch it live. We do it 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC at live.twit.tv. If you're watching live, chat live at irc.twit.tv. That's open to all. Of course, our club members get their own Velvet Rope access behind the Velvet Rope in the Club Twit Discord. After the fact, on-demand versions of this show available at twit.tv/WW. That's our website. While you're there, you'll see a link to the YouTube channel. There's a dedicated YouTube channel. There's also of course, an RSS feed, because it's a podcast, which means you can get it in any podcast player of your choice or even RSS reader of your choice. But if you subscribe, and I think that's a good idea, you will get it automatically every Wednesday the minute it's available, and so you'll never have to wonder what to do on Thursday. You got a Windows Weekly, that's what. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Richard. Enjoy some Angel's Envy, and we will see you next week on Windows Weekly. Bye-bye.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Ad Astra Magazine, and each week I join with my co-host to bring you This Week in Space, the latest and greatest news from the final frontier. We talk to NASA chiefs, space scientists, engineers, educators, and artists, and sometimes we just shoot the breeze over what's hot and what's not in space, books, and TV. And we do it all for you, our fellow true believers. So whether you're an armchair adventurer or waiting for your turn to grab a slot in Elon's Mars rocket, join us on This Week in Space and be part of the greatest adventure of all time.